2025, No Turning Back, a live event with world-renowned astrologer, the Leo King. This isn't just astrology, it's a revelation of the most extraordinary cosmic transits of our time. These alignments, thousands of years in the making, will shape the world and your personal destiny in ways you can't imagine. The Leo King will break down how these astrological events will impact global shifts in your life, offering clarity and insight during this pivotal moment in history. Plus, looking back on the last 5 years, these special videos have made a name for themselves. Discover how these celestial events will influence global dynamics, societal shifts, and your individual path forward. Whether you're a seasoned astrology enthusiast or a curious beginner, this event will provide clarity, guidance, and inspiration during a pivotal moment in history. The experience doesn't stop there. Following his presentation, the Leo King will host a live Q&A session, giving you the unique opportunity to ask your most pressing questions and gain real-time insights tailored to your concerns. This event is a must-attend for anyone seeking to navigate these unprecedented times with awareness and intention. Mark your calendar, invite your friends, and prepare to embark on a cosmic journey that will leave you informed and empowered. Don't miss No Turning Back, a one-of-a-kind event that will define how you approach the future. Be there.
Hey, what is going on, everyone? It is David Palmer, Leo King, and Dr. Ann Wohlcke here with History in the Stars 2025, another year of it. Super happy to be here, of course, here on highvibe.tv. Today, we're going to be talking about the beginning and the end, or ending, of the industrial age. And where are we going to next? How is it related with this astrology, the history? It's going to be really fun today, especially the action-packed week we've had about where this world is really going when it comes to talking of eras or ages, or even what is going to happen with work and so forth. What's going on? How are you doing, Ann?
I am doing okay.
You doing all right?
Yes, I'm doing great. Things are good. I'm feeling like we're entering a golden age for some reason. I'm worried I might be looking for a job when my job is replaced by AI.
Oh, wonderful. Isn't that so golden?
Yes.
I to be honest with you, I'm an optimist and I'm a positive person, and people know. I mean, I definitely would have rather had Trump in than Kamala Harris for sure. I feel like it's selling a little bit too far, too fast. There's too many things that are gonna happen first that makes people kind of get crushed, and that's how any golden age or anything would happen. Is, let's not forget, I don't even know what age we're in at this moment. I would call it,
We're in a weird age.
we're in a weird age, right? So to get from weird to golden so quick it takes work. And I think if people understand that it takes work, and that no president nor administration delivers that, that's something that the people in concert with government and all people have to usher in together. So yeah, I think once people realize that, I think it'll be a little bit easier to digest, but I haven't been able to digest it. There's also, maybe we could, if we have some time in this show, our shows go too long, so we're trying not to make that happen. But, that idea of golden age is usually referred to as a Saturn period, which we are in the age of Aquarius going to be in a Saturn realm. But it's more about people in power over others and that idea of the golden age. So that's not something I really look forward to.
Why is a golden age a Saturn age? I never knew that.
Because with Saturn, of course, there's this order. There's also connections to Roman times, right? The energy of Saturn bringing order. And so that's the idea of like this Roman idea of order. So, and power and triumphs and so forth. So to me, it's kind of like, I'm going to be honest with you, Anne, it's been a very weird time for me. Because we're going to be looking at this astrology, especially we had the Sun-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius for the first time in our lives. Last time was 1779 for the first time. It's been a long time since this happened. And I think what's been hard for me is there's so much I agree with what's happening in the world. But then at the same time, I have a pullback because I think, one, some people kind of overhype things. Two, they are too fearful of things without kind of understanding what's actually happening. And then three, there is an Oz-like effect going on of people really believing this kind of like savior complex through mixing the religion into people, which is what we see in history. People always idolizing people or expecting people to do certain things in an idealistic way. I just have never been that kind of person, I guess. So for me, it's hard for me to be like, that's where it is. To me, I know New Age got played out too much, but to me, I like that one a lot better than Golden Age, because it kind of confines it. To me, I feel like I'm much more open, and the astrology says it's more open. Maybe we all don't want gold. Maybe some of us want silver. Maybe some of us want other colors or just even other vibrations. I
would like an emerald age.
Oh, there you go.
But I think that you're right. I don't look outside of myself for the signposts of we've arrived because this person has been elected, or I do think the people who are in power matter a lot.
Yes.
It really matters that we do have the ability to function in the world as self-sufficient people, right? That we can control as much of our lives as possible and also live safely. So I think that government does have an important role, but I feel like if the age is golden in any way, maybe it is in us taking more responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think what was interesting about the inauguration and the events of the last few days for me was that it really was an inauguration, unlike many.
Yes.
His speech was not an inaugural speech, inaugural address, which is usually, the one that you go to. It always is much more about the general feeling and trying to make people head in a certain direction, and you don't usually see the person who's the outgoing president right there behind you while the president is now saying, we're going to wipe away everything those people did. They were horrible. It was really an interesting experience watching the speech. What did you think? We haven't even talked about it yet. I don't know what you thought.
Oh, yeah. The last person that could have done a speech like that would have been Grover Cleveland. So I think the media really missed an opportunity of using history, for example, to be like, well, this happened one time before. Because what makes it weird is Grover Cleveland was president, then he wasn't president, and then he became president again. The same kind of Lily Frog effect here. And so it's a little different because you were president and then you weren't president and then you're back to one. So I think that's a new script. It's like, so that means Trump campaigned through the primaries of 2015, then became the Republican nominee and then had to run against Hillary. So that's a whole lot of work. Then you're president for 4 years, and then you run again, and then somehow you don't get in there. Then you are running for this moment for the 4. So this guy has not stopped since 2015 talking. I mean, right. About everything under the sun, right? Yeah. About right. And so to me, like, the speech was kind of like, well, yeah, it's more of the same, right? More of the same, and more of what you're gonna be like. Everybody is already kind of like, I don't want to hear your. People didn't vote for him for fluff. They voted for. I want to hear you say something. I want to see things being done, and I didn't think it was weird because. Maybe it was weird because it was inside the Capitol, so people were closer, even though they're pretty much that close on the rotunda that's outside, right? Right. So it's like it's because they put the podium kind of in the center and a little bit away. But if you look at the shots, all the presidents are in the same vicinity. But it feels more like the president's always alone. This one kind of feels like, nope, he can look over and. But he wasn't looking over, and meanwhile, we could watch him because the shot wasn't so tight that you couldn't see the people behind him a lot of the time. So you could see Hillary leaning over or rolling her eyeballs or doing her body language in certain ways, or you could see Biden's. At one point, actually, at the beginning of the whole ceremony, and now we're going down a different path, but. I'll just say this quickly, but at the very beginning of it, when one of the women was speaking at the beginning, I don't remember which, were they senators or even, I don't remember who spoke at the very beginning. Oh, Klobuchar, the senator. She's part of the commission on inaugurations. Right. So as she was speaking, she said something like, and let's hope, and we are so proud of the peaceful transfer of power. And in the background, you could see Biden cross himself just really quickly. Did you notice that? No. I mean, and I was thinking, did I make that up? So I rewound it and watched, and yeah, he does. So anyway, it's a weird way religion comes into it, but I think it was unique because it was in the Capitol, right? And the last time that happened was with Ronald Reagan, but it also is just the context of it. So you're inside the Capitol, and it was such a contentious, crazy whole last, not even beyond the 4 years, right? Since he lost the last election. So it was just very interesting. Plus having all these giants of future industries in the and current ones, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm thinking of, it's not like the industry giants of past you might think of, like I would think of as a British historian, people like Isambard Kingdom Brunel, who I keep wanting to do a show about. He was the British industrial giant who built all sorts of bridges and ships and all of that. So it was like this age's industry giants were all there in the background. And that was interesting too. Yeah, it was interesting. You bring up some really good points, like, because it was... Let's stick to a fact, right? It was a peaceful transfer of power 4 years ago. Just didn't go the way that it it reminds me of coronations of kings or queens in England. It's like Charles III did things differently. Like, he made some adjustments, right? But I guess when you're a monarch, people kind of just go, well, he's got some of the traditions, and then there's some added ones, and he's changing some things here, and that's okay because he's the monarch. But in America, it's almost like we need it to look the same all the time, kind of energy, right? So because it didn't look the same, or because, and it was so interesting to see a lot more historical facts come out. It was like, well, Trump didn't go to Biden's inauguration. That was the first president to do that in like 164 years. It was like, oh, now you're starting to say the first of 4 that haven't done it prior. Right? So it's not like Trump's the first one. Right. Or there's been some good podcasts lately of people being like, that were on the left being like, you know what? I kind of understand Trump now. He felt like he didn't lose. He thought it was a rigged election. Well, if you really believe that, then you're going to own that. Like if he was faking it, you wouldn't, you would probably still want to show up and try and be like, hey, look at me. But no, it's like, no, I'm gone. So it's kind of interesting to me that there was a peaceful transfer of power. Like Biden came in, Trump left. I mean, they tried to use January 6th, but what's odd about that is there's more facts to that. Like you're allowed to contest the election through the Senate and through the House. And as that happened was when the quote unquote riot happened. The second Arizona was the first state to cause both houses to go into 30-minute sessions to look at the electoral vote and question it. So I think people forget like that little fact of like, and that it was the first election Republicans had questioned an election in, I forgot how long, whereas every election there's been those same, denials of the elections on the left with Trump in Congress on January 6th and prior, even especially during George W. Bush. And it goes on a long time, but they never covered those things. So to me, it's kind of the drama that the Shakespearean play of Biden to do that, or for the senator that's on the Democrats, Klobuchar, on the inaugural committee to make that known, right? It's like, let's just keep the story going that way. And anybody who doesn't do history would, of course, fall for it. But to me, it's like, I'm not emotional about any of it. It's not like I'm taking sides. It's more just like, okay, it's politics. That's playing a game.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love to do. I suppose because I have the luxury of it not impacting me directly. So if something was impacting me directly, I would probably have a lot more invested in it. But I mean, I honestly just see it as I see history, right? When I'm looking at it, I'm analyzing it historically. And I always kind of step out of it. And that's what I like to watch things from that hermetic perspective. And then I can experience it and have my emotional side as well. But, that's why we talk about all of these things, because it's really important to analyze it for what's actually happening or what we're seeing, all these little elements. And it's so fascinating to me how it plays out and really compares to the astrology of these same transits in the past. So
what did you think about Trump not having his hand on the Bible?
I couldn't tell if he didn't. So he didn't? Has that been
it
a
was
big
deal? It was here. So I actually, we could show the audience.
I was wondering because I saw Melania holding the Abraham Lincoln Bible and another, I don't remember what the other one was.
It was Abraham Lincoln's personal Bible, and then it was a King James Bible, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, so he didn't have his hand on the Bible. So of course, online has every kind of crazy theory. Some people being like, well, that's because he already had taken the oath. The other theory I heard was, oh, well, this is the corporation America, and he's not going to swear on that. And that but I looked it up. Like, you do not have to have your hand on the Bible to swear the oath of presidency, because we don't have church and state connected. It's just swearing and taking your oath. It doesn't have to be on the Bible. Right? So imagine if you're an American and you became president, and like me as an astrologer, would I do it on the Bible? No. Maybe I'll pull out John Dee's, Monas Hieroglyphica.
But now
and I would do it on that.
2 books. You could have
and then I'd have Nostradamus prophecies underneath. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that would be a choice. Like, you don't have to have your hand on the Bible. It's not in the law.
Well, I would have my hand on the Bible when I'm elected president.
Right.
I'll have it. And you know why? I love the tradition of it. And that's
they
always
were rushing.
Really great picture. And poor Melania, she's just standing there with the Bibles, and otherwise she would have been more connected into the ceremony. But he probably just forgot. I don't think
they were rushed because they were a couple minutes late because there were so many people inside the Capitol. And so JD Vance's just finished at 11:59 a.m. and then Chief Justice Roberts has to now get in get in line and just throws it up the second it hits noon, which is interesting because with Biden, they just did it 8 minutes prior. So that was what was weird. Is like mine was at 11:52 a.m.
That's very strange.
Right. So that's not the time you're supposed to do it. And then Biden only had 3 guns, and it wasn't a 21 gun salute, meaning 21 actual rounds that were fired off the cannon guns. It was only 18, and there was the 17 that were live and 1 that was a dud. And so for me to see the 21 gun salute again, after the second the president says and finishes his oath, that's when the 21 gun salute goes off. And we saw that. So to me, that's the real kicker. But to me, I can't believe people are like losing their minds over this. It just goes to show you how much the religious world has really kind of become extreme again.
Well, it goes to show you also how people are so wrapped up in these emotional sides. I don't even know what to say about it. It's been really an interesting week, from the fires to the inauguration. To seeing the way people react about things and how emotional people get about everything that's being thrown up in front of them, and just taking it and running with it and getting so upset. When I feel like that's, I'm more suspicious of all these problems coming up, everybody pointing out, look at this, and creating these controversies. Because to me, if there are all these controversies you're supposed to pay attention to, it's distracting us from something else. I mean, that's always how I feel about that.
Yeah, I agree. Because the sides thing is getting, well, it's very Neptune 29 Pisces that's coming up again. And the Civil War was the last time we had it here. So, I think that's where it gets very polarized, right? But I also think it was somebody had brought up a good thing on the chat saying that it was quite Pluto Aquarius to have the beautiful paintings of the Revolutionary War that are in the Capitol building right there as the backdrop of the setting, right? So I thought that was interesting as well too. And also, I mean, it was kind of interesting that Ronald Reagan was the last president to do it inside the Capitol building because it was so cold outside. And it was in 85 after the 84. And 1984 was the biggest sweep of an election since 1820s Monroe, who took all the electoral votes. That's what was interesting to me. It was like Trump kind of didn't take all the electoral votes this time, but he had such a dramatic swing of voters and people that it was kind of a crazy sweeping victory we haven't seen in a long time, that it felt kind of Reagan-esque in a way. And also people had counted Reagan out at the first election, and even a second election, they were questioning him, and then it was a blowout, so that was kind of an interesting, 40-year thing that had just changed.
Yeah. It's also interesting that Jimmy Carter's body had just lain in state, or been in the Capitol building in the Rotunda.
Yeah.
A few weeks before.
Very, very much so. And was president during the same Chiron placement coming into Taurus next year and so forth.
See, it's all converging in the Capitol building.
Yeah. And so, I think, with today, it's kind of interesting because what really I think is sparking today's conversation is, and I had said it, and I think a lot of people who are really into astrology, hopefully they think this way, but, having the first Sun-Pluto conjunction, you want to pay attention to what is the big events that will be recorded in history on that day. That day was January 21st, the day after the inauguration. And of course, it was this $500 billion Stargate AI private industry investment that's going to happen here in America. So one, to make people more clear on this, because I think people are getting lost. The government is not doing this. This is not a government thing. It's not a Trump thing. It's Trump announcing that businesses are coming back into America because of his policies, meaning presidents do that in order to show that they are running a good country, that it also helps for the world stage and for other countries to buy our bonds, to buy our treasuries. And so at that point, he had said in his first 24 hours that he had gotten $3 trillion worth of business back into America. 500 billion of it was the biggest one, of course, this Stargate AI data center and many projects that fall under the sun of that. And where does that move us forward? Because it also talked about jobs. It was going to create over 100,000 to 200,000 jobs. And that's what has sparked today's talk about, I'm calling it the weird gap, after you and I have been doing some fun research today and stuff, of between moving into this new age or revolution. We're used to understanding the industrial age and the industrial revolution, the idea of labor and being paid to go to work and creating like this work schedule and going to a factory or going to a job every day. What does that look like now? And how is that relatable in the astrology? So what are some of your thoughts just going into this talk today?
Well, that was the first thing I thought of when Trump made his announcement, or when I hadn't watched the full announcement until today, but I saw the story come up showing that he had announced this big Stargate, and it is Stargate, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And first, that is just so interesting that the facility would be in Texas, and it was all about AI, and that we could become the leader in the world for AI. But the first thing I thought of was labor, right? Because I think that's been a lot of the fear about AI. And we've talked about that in other shows, that people are afraid that somehow we are all going to lose our jobs and we won't have, it'll just be like the thumbnail where we're all lining up for jobs. And if you're not proficient in AI, too bad. And yeah, it is going to shift, right? Eventually that AI will be more incorporated into everything that we do, or how the world works. We can't imagine the ways in which it will be. At this point, it'll be long after we're gone that it really becomes realized, I think. When you look at the astrology, I think that we're really in a similar place to the age of the Industrial Revolution beginning. And it is in similar astrology.
Yeah.
And that's not, unique to say that, and we can talk more about that. But what's really interesting to me is that when you think about what that meant for the changes in everything about our lives, I mean, it really was the beginning of a new age in the industrial age, just like that transit had been the previous cycle before that.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking mostly about this from the perspective of labor and how much will be shifted about just what we think of as work. And that has been shifting, just as it had in the 1770s. So that's when you see the real introduction of the steam engine into a factory. That starts to happen in the 1770s.
Yeah.
And they figure out how much it can produce. It's more than manual labor.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is, how were things like sugar or cotton, all these things being produced at that time? When there was a huge demand for all those products around the world, the way that was being filled was by enslaved labor. And so we don't think about that aspect of it, that the introduction of technology was something that made abolition start to become possible after that. They started to realize, okay, so we're going to shift from having this enslaved workforce, or we're going to shift from having a workforce of serfs, because serfs become emancipated as well. And now we're going to get regular people to leave their farms and come into factories and work for cheap wages for long days, and the entire family is going to have to work.
Right.
And we'll have children working. So there's this weird aspect of it that's both good and bad. It's this transitional period to a whole new way of life. So that's something to think about. But it also is something where I hope we're mindful of not allowing the technology to be something that we get excited about the technology and don't think about the human impact, right? And we've talked about that before too. But it's just so funny that that was one of the first things that he did.
It wasn't funny to me. I got
I
people were cutting me flack. Everybody's like, "It's going to be about crypto. It's going to be about crypto." I'm like, "It's going to be about AI." Actually, my whole Mars Retrograde special was about this whole part of the AI thing, and then my X event that's coming up here in the next 2 months that I'm predicting, right, is about this convergence. It was even more than about AI too. It was about AGI and then ASI, right? So, but they did it in very layman's terms. The AGI, they didn't describe to people well enough to understand that the machine models are just not just machine learning, computerized things, but this idea that they actually can start, coding and doing things and intertwining into themselves and actually form some sort of ability to process and think for themselves. And then the ASI, which they called just super AI, which I thought was funny, but is the idea of artificial intelligence with consciousness. And so that the idea of who gets that first is really the main thing, right? Whoever has that ability will be able to figure things out more than any other country. So it kind of reminds me, because it was 1779, the last time the Sun and Pluto met in Aquarius, and then of course going through the 1780s into the 1790s was the whole Pluto Aquarius transit. And it's interesting because these kind of innovations come out at that time, but the Industrial Revolution really doesn't take its big kind of stand until we kind of leave Pluto and Aquarius. So, but there's that transitory place that everybody kind of gets caught in between. I think we see it now from the idea of what a blue collar worker is now today. Has to work 3 blue collar jobs in order to survive. So factory workers are very minimal, especially in the Western world. Child labor has been something that took that out, as well as globalization with trade and currency trading all around. That it makes me kind of think about how everybody wants to be white collar, right? Yet a lot of the jobs that AI is replacing is white collar and blue collar at the same time, right? So the blue collar jobs that traditionally, one person could be the breadwinner in the family and raise a family and be working at a factory is no longer relevant. And that's where you really see this kind of explosion in the, I would say like after post World War II of unions becoming so important for a blue collar worker to be part of, to make sure that they have a union that's fighting for benefits and fighting for equal pay and raises and all these kind of things. And you're seeing unions not have the same power that they used to. And I don't think it's because of a political thing. I think it's just because the places that unions are representing aren't having as much power, because whether it's Amazon factories now or anything like that, people are leaving the jobs because they're doing those jobs temporarily with not the idea of I'm going to stay here forever, but more of, okay, I'm in high school, or you know what, I was in this industry and that's no longer good, so I'm doing this for now, right? So even people at grocery stores, like, I don't know if I want to be a part of a union and have to do all this stuff and pay my dues and do all this. Like, if I'm only going to be here until I don't know when's the next thing. So I think there's a natural falling apart of unions in that form. But that's what AI is coming after, and AGI especially, is this, whether it's robotics, even the Internet of Things, like all these things that really deal with, blue collar and white collar. Because whether it's accountants, that's what's kind of interesting, is what, it's kind of moving us towards a system where everything's automated in a way that's precise, which is nice, but also doesn't need a human to really be looking over it at some point, because what's kind of crazy is the human will fail at the math, and then also take 20 times as long to do the math, and is already using a computer and a software program to do the tax or to do the the F&I statements or whatever it might be, the financials. So I think that's where it's kind of interesting, where it's a little different, that it was the idea of the industrial factory owner, and then this idea of like the money and where it was coming from. And those became kind of the hot spot, really higher society people. And then everybody else, you're into a factory, right? Whereas now it's kind of like, well, is there really a factory to go to? And then is there a position for you to watch over the AI or something? No. So that's where I think we're kind of into a new uncharted territory.
I think what's different also about what's unique about his announcement, was that today or yesterday?
It was yesterday.
Feels like it was today. It was just unique that it wasn't just about the AGI. It was also about the medical side of it. And that's, I think, what freaked a lot of people out, right?
Very much, yeah.
So a lot of people, a lot of the headlines were, Trump approves AI with mRNA. And that was all over the place. And I think that was because I do think there's still a lot of people who want to keep people divided, right? And so it's emphasizing the thing that he didn't even mention himself, right? He had the other guy, I can't remember.
The Oracle CEO and the investor and the CEO of OpenAI.
So anyway, so that's interesting because it really, what I started to do after I saw these announcements was I was starting to think, well, what was happening with medical interventions in the 18th century in the 1770s also? And there was a lot happening. There were a lot of developments that really started in that period of time, and then they really take off when obviously Pluto goes into Pisces. So I don't know what that's about, but that's when everything really takes off, the developments. But in this period of time, it was in 1778 that George Washington used the smallpox vaccine. He vaccinated his troops.
Right.
And they survived, right? And it was a success. And it wasn't vaccination. It's variolocation. I can never say it properly.
Yeah, it was putting small bit of smallpox on, like cutting you open and like kind of putting it on you, and then
you got a little case of the smallpox and you survived and you were immune.
Yeah.
So that was, that was what they did. But by 1796, then the smallpox vaccination was developed. And I went and looked at that, and that's an interesting story. That,
do you have anything we can show people on that?
Yeah, well, we can show Edward Jenner, who was the person who did this. And he's a Taurus, and it's so funny that I had seen that earlier, and you pointed out that one of the, I can't think of his name now, the OpenAI guy.
Sam Altman is a triple Taurus.
Yeah. So anyway, so here's another of these leading people, but he's the one who actually created the first vaccine out of cowpox. But in reading about him, and I don't know if it says it in this Wikipedia article.
Yeah, and he's a Pluto Sag, like at the very beginning of it, born 1749. Yeah, so 1760s Pluto Capricorn, 12 years prior. Yeah.
So here's a Gen Zer of his time.
Right.
But what's interesting about him is that he experimented with the first vaccine, because I went, of course I think, and I was asking OpenAI about this one. So thanks to the Taurus or whatever, but he experimented the first one on an 8-year-old boy. That's what it came up with on OpenAI. So then I went and did some research, and it turns out that it was his a guy who worked on his farm. It was his child that he experimented with the first vaccine on. And it was using the cowpox. And there was such uproar about cowpox because it was believed there were a lot of reasons why people didn't want to be infected with an animal's stuff. But one of the things was a worry that you would turn into the animal, that you would start to exhibit characteristics of it. Also that it was somehow not Christian to do these things. A lot of all of the these early experiments were frowned upon because of people being Christian, having a Christian outlook.
Or Judeo-Christian, especially
yeah.
with the connection to kosher and not eating certain meats and certain so forth.
Yeah. But in a way, I thought about that, and I thought, how interesting and something to think about, especially in light of unleashing things onto the public before they've been fully experimented with controlled studies, like just giving things to people out there without this. It was like at that time, no one ever thought of medical safety at all because this was new. There was nothing, there were no boards in place that were supposed to regulate how you experimented, except for just, the Royal Society or something that, like there would be academic standards that they thought, but no one was thinking, wow, should we just let this guy give an 8-year-old kid a cowpox shot? But it turned out okay. It's just that's the kind of stuff that makes me wonder who's going to be. We are actually the people who will be experimented upon in this new world, right? So we'll be the ones around when whatever AI stuff goes off the rails, however it will be us who are, but maybe it won't. It will just all be like the 8-year-old boy who never got smallpox and he lived a long life.
I mean, I think when you look at it, the $500 billion, and even if that much does end up going in, which isn't for sure, right? It's like $100 billion at first, and then over the next 4 years, another $100 billion each year. The first thing is the Oracle CEO is the one who is kowtowing the technology for the healthcare system about records and being able to have a doctor have all your healthcare records digitally and have AI. Let's say if you're in a little town and middle of nowhere America, that doctor could get insight on how to treat you that a Stanford doctor would, and so forth. That's where he started with. Then of course he moved into the other side of like the experimental stuff they're trying to do about cancer and how it would be an individual vaccination off your genetic blueprint and then print out a genetic blueprint mRNA vaccine based off your own genes, right? I want to say that in this idea of AGI or AI, has all of it, right? Like that's just one part of it. Let's say 10%. Over the last 3 years, the venture capital money has all gone into AI, the healthcare system, and then a hybrid AI healthcare companies where it's about that. So the reason they're calling it Stargate, I think, is a lot more connected to other reasons for it, whether it's military, whether it's space, whether it's going into different understandings of this world. That's part of it. The other thing is, so people aren't freaking themselves out yet, this wasn't the American government making this deal. It's the idea that Trump as president is clearing the red tape for any business to come and do business here and not be tariffed by you choosing to go to another country and do it and then try and sell the products here or any of the ideas here because you're not making it here. So number one, because I think some people are like, I can't believe the government's going to be doing this, right? It's like the government's not doing it. It's private industry. And the government's not the one wrapping the money into this either. So I think that's important to note because that does remind me of the Industrial Revolution. It's like, okay, there's money coming in, but it's like the idea of like the Industrial Revolution that really started in London. It's kind of like, oh, there's these factories being made. There's all these new devices that make factories to where we can actually create products and on a mass scale, right? And so that's the idea of like where money starts to circulate is around the idea of where's the place where things are happening. And so that creates the idea of loans on much more of a business scale that come from private banks and this private banking moving into okay, well, you got a factory, I'm going to invest into you and I'm going to take a 20%, da, da, da. Like all of that becomes kind of what the norm is today through the Industrial Revolution. And it didn't have to deal with government right away. Of course, government can get involved and does get involved into things, but I think people have to look a little bit, of course, first of all, with caution to those kind of like experimental things, because a lot of questions about the last time that was just applied by governments all over the world. But two, I think that people have to, first of all, realize that's not the whole thing, right? That's that Oracle CEO trying to sound like he knows a lot about something. And obviously that's where Oracle spends more time. By the way, that same Oracle CEO is who supplies all of your TikTok feed. The Oracle servers are the ones that feed into the ByteDance company. So, ironically enough, right? But, and their headquarters are right down the street from me, or Oracle. But Sam Altman, OpenAI, was talking much more in a generalized open theme about trying to understand the future, or even be able to cure diseases, or just even understand diseases and stuff better. He didn't go into the vaccination element of it. And, you know, when it comes to trying to figure out new power or energy sources, or things like tracking weather better and stuff like that, there's so many other places it can go, especially understanding our universe much better. But to me, that Stargate name is really interesting, because it does feel like where it can be this new situation is whether time travel is really possible. I think the idea of AGI and taking in, whether it's Isaac Newton, or if you take Einstein's work, or you take any of these theories that have been out there for a long time and apply them into some sort of setting and have an AI do it, what would happen? Mm-hmm. So whether that's the theory of relativity, or and moving that into quantum different fields. And so I think it's one of those things to where it's very Pluto Aquarius. Like, Pluto is be afraid, no matter what sign it is, be afraid. So it's so funny, they talk about the oligarchy now and the billionaire thing, right? That was Pluto Capricorn. Just lived that for 16 years. This is who has the connections to the technologies and the network, which very much we're on a new level, because we're in 2025, of like the IoT, the Internet of Things, meaning like we know how to have our AGI connect through APIs and through all these different ways in the internet to be able to connect with everything. That's where the power is at now. So of course, America's wanting to be first. And that's, again, listening to that speech and understanding how politics work. Like, that's one thing that people didn't see for 4 years, is Biden wasn't bragging about these companies wanting to be in America and do work, because they actually left. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's weird for people, I think, to come back to see that many companies are wanting to do business in America again and set up shop here.
Yeah. You know, one thing that is interesting, since you talked about the billionaires, and I do want to point out that if we looked at Edward Jenner, I wanted to make sure his name was Edward. Edward Jenner. He was solidly a middle-class guy. His dad actually was a reverend, probably in the Church of England, it doesn't say. And the vicar of Berkeley. And he received a strong basic education. And then also I told you earlier, the first thing I noticed on his Wikipedia page was, in 1802, he became a master mason on December 30th, 1802, in the Lodge of Faith and Friendship. From 1812 to 1813, he served as a worshipful master of Royal Berkeley Lodge of Faith and Friendship.
Which is, again, the time of these times. Pluto Aquarius actually has to deal with secret society. We did that great episode. Yeah. Secret societies, Masons, Rosicrucians, right? So to me, the tech thing that we saw at the inauguration, to me, is more of like the real secret society of technology.
But what's different is that he's just an average guy at that time who probably became a doctor because it was a path towards respectability.
Yeah.
And it was a craft. Really, he started to learn at a time when being a doctor was more of a skill or a craft. And he would have been a barber surgeon. So someone who learns by actually doing this. And then what's interesting is it says in his education and training that, so he lived during the transitional time. So I would imagine that's Pluto Sagittarius now too, right? That he learned in the old style, and then after he's been practicing for 20 years, he obtained the degree of MD from the University of St. Andrews. So by 1792, they have the official medical degree for doctors, which didn't exist before that. So it's a period of time where a lot of these crafts are becoming more professionalized, and then it's become something you can go to school for. So that's another thing that I don't know how that's working, but as I was sitting here thinking, okay, but he's middle class, the people who we've seen out there in the world so far, it's only been 1 day or 2 days with Donald Trump as president. So hopefully he'll start to feature some ordinary people and trying to support what they're doing as well.
Yes.
Because is AI going to become the new middle class? That's where I feel is the most anxiety, that people want to know where we're going to fit. And I can say, okay, well, for example, in that medical example, if Edward Jenner was brought forth through our time machine to today, he'd be someone who would now start to learn, how do I use AGI to help me diagnose and treat? And I'm sure there will be networks of people who will try to bring it to all sorts of people who are underserved by medical, by the medical world or whatever. So yeah, I think it's just very interesting. I'm not the type of person who fears the new stuff, and I'm always very excited about it. And I probably tend to be too, this is so great, this is going to be possible. But then I will start to worry and think, all of my air sign qualities come out, or I start to analyze, well, what could happen if this happens, and all of that.
Right.
But I do hope that we'll be mindful of it, because what tends to happen at this point in Pluto Aquarius, going into Pisces, and with Henry VIII doing that, new things get implemented on society, and people think later about, oh, what are we supposed to do with the displaced people? Like for Henry VIII, we got rid of the monasteries. What are we going to do with all these monks and nuns? Or what are we going to do with the land? Okay, we're going to give the land to all these people, but what are we going to do about hospitals now? And then those start to develop.
Right.
So it's like this new reality is created, and then things start to develop.
Yeah, or even during the Revolutionary War when it ended, what are we going to do with all these loyalists and all these Brits? You can go up to Canada, or you can get on a boat.
Yeah, or how many do you think just sort of laid low and stayed there, and their kids probably were?
Everybody would have known. That's the thing about Pluto Aquarius, that you know your neighbor, who they are, and what side they're on. We're in that world now.
I would have just become a Quaker and said, I'm a pacifist now.
I mean,
I'm a Quaker.
Yeah, I mean, and that might have been possible, but I think that still, again, it looks, there's a show of patriotism.
Right now, you mean? Or
then, right? Mm-hmm. Like you would show your support for the revolution, right? It's kind of how France, same thing. I mean, it was kind of easy to see. You're not for revolution. You just want to be the rich. That's what's going to be crazy, right? So like, we're at a time to where to counter the fears of the people with AI or whatever, when Pluto in Aquarius really starts to get going here in the next, decade, French Revolution's part of that, and it becomes anybody who's not part of, or anybody who has too much power and control and money and influence, your head's getting chopped off in the street, and chaos and disorder happens. So to kind of help maybe with some context, is during that time in 1779, like people in the colonies, the 13 colonies where the war was happening, it was mainly rural, it was farming. People were selling these things locally. The cash crops such as tobacco and wheat, of course, were big parts of income, but that was mainly because of the trade to England, which of course was taking it for themselves and trading it other places. And so trade and merchants happened to be kind of where the money was at, the ports, right? Like, so it kind of reminds me of the longshoremen today, but it was a little bit better, I think, back then, right? Like you kind of owned the ship and you kind of dealt with the trades and you dealt with different merchants, and they were all about, of course, the goods that were coming out of the colonies. And then it was a barter system. Of course, there was money, but the colonialists were using British pounds and Spanish silver coins. And when paper notes were issued by colonial governments and a robust barter system, though. And so barter was often a big thing. Pluto in Aquarius does feel very Burning Man barter system getting ready to come into play, that most people still, I think, are like, what? But it might be, hey, you have your API AI key to get into this, to add to my network, and I'll give you mine for this, you know. But the impact that it had during that time, we've talked, of course, and everybody knows the Stamp Act really is one of the big acts that creates this kind of really inflammation of revolution that begins over the period up until the declaration of it for independence. The Tea Act, of course, is like the second big one that creates, of course, Boston Tea Party and so forth. And it's really watching the British Crown tax everybody and take as much as they can. And then, of course, most people during that time, if you were in America, it was the war economy. So the colonial men, you served in the military, and then the farms and the businesses were disrupted because of the war. And then inflation, just like now, soared because of the Continental Congress printing paper money, which was extremely devalued. And then there was wartime hardships. The blockades of the major ports by the British Navy disrupted trade, leading to shortages and higher prices for basic goods. Very similar to right now.
Mm-hmm. I was just trying to think, okay, so this was all happening in the context of a revolution that was an outward, actual revolution.
Right.
But today we're experiencing a lot of the same things. And so what's the bigger picture? Because there should be a revolution going on.
The bigger picture is like, it's not the old way anymore of like, I have a bunch of money, so I get whatever I want. You have to be creating things that people want and people need, and that people coalesce to come together for an idea or a purpose. And I think what's hard about it is the Revolutionary War. Of course, it's a war. One, that sucks. But two, it's in order to find independence and have it for the first time. So there's a high value on that. The problem right now is there's no high value system enough to get people to go towards something. And so, you know, is AI going to make people do that? No, most people are terrified of it. So it's more like something's got to start, you know, messing with everyday people's ability to where they realize, even if I had a bank account full of money, that wouldn't be good enough. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, so this is where the trade war stuff gets more intense. And this is why George Washington, at the end of the whole Pluto Aquarius transit, when he becomes the first president at the first Congress, and then by the time he leaves on his last time serving as president, his farewell address, I think, says it all. Just like America remaining a neutral country, maintaining trade partnerships and not picking sides with people because you don't want to be on the wrong side. You want to stay neutral because of whether it is, you don't want a war to go back somebody up, that we might not have the manpower, the money, or anything. And at the same time, you don't want to be on the wrong side because you might need to trade with somebody who you were once not friends with because you were helping another person. So he says, still go help people, but don't make long-term commitments. So I think it's kind of interesting that America's embedded off the fact of staying neutral and not being in something like the World Health Organization, which we just pulled out of again, or the treaty with Paris for the climate accords, or any of this stuff, because it really does keep you locked in, and money sucked. And so George Washington would be exactly this moment, which we're seeing right now, is get out of everything. Focus on this place. So I think that's kind of the hard part of it, where you could devil's advocate that against George Washington and be like, well, because you were that way, or especially that's more than George Washington, but the Continental Congress, many people don't realize that the colonials, like after the Tea Party movement, when blockades started happening and they're trying to restrict stuff to go to, they have to go without as well. So it wasn't like, oh, they're not going to get it, but we got it all. It was like, no, nobody got the goods. That people had to not have the luxuries that they once had. So there was some suffering in order to suffer the other side. Plus, people weren't picking cotton and picking tea and picking all the things that were needed in the middle of the war, disrupting everything.
Right. Well, you hope they were picking them, all those things, right?
Right.
Because wars always destroy crops. That's one of the things that they would always do.
Yeah, and now today I would say we have an industrialized war that's coming to its end of what it's done through industrialization of farms today with GMOs to there's not even enough nutrients in the soil, right? And that's because of the industrialized system of market, mass produce, put in a factory, package it, plastic it, microplastics. Like if you think about it, we're at the peak of an era that's coming to an end. We talked about the labor part of it earlier. I mean, blue collar work is, 2 to 3 jobs of those really is what blue collar is today. And then white collars that you have one job. But in today's society, there is not a lot of people that have one job and can support the whole family. It's both partners having white collar jobs. That's more of a norm that's actually been pushed on society over the last 20 years.
But not only that, then you have to move in with your parents who are retired probably from white collar jobs,
right,
to be able to have a home. I mean, that's how extreme it's gotten. Or people who are able to buy homes in some locations have to go in with their entire family to be able to get it. So it's gotten to this extreme point right now.
Yeah, and a lot of the baby boomers got the kind of peak of what the idea was of society. It took a long time to get to it, really, if you think about after post-World War II, in those like kind of peak years of the 50s, 60s, especially 70s, 80s, into the 90s, like that was normal. Go to college, get a job, and you'll be able to buy a home and do all that. It was a very slim amount of time. People forget that even in the 1900s, there was, I always think of the grapes of wrath, or I always think of, I just think of like people not realizing that there was horrible issues with farming, horrible issues with refrigeration still, right? The refrigerator wasn't out fully yet. People were still throwing salt on things to try to get things from one side of the country to the other. And if there was a drought, or if there was bad winds, or there was bad, like this stuff always was a problem. And so, there was like this little peak moment of like society that one group of people got. And so, today it's almost like they just changed all the numbers to, if you go online and go, what's the percentage of Americans who make $1 million, right? Like a year. They don't go off that anymore. They go off the net worth off, the baby boomers who have their IRA, who have their 401k, and then they use the net worth of their house and their car. So that one, it's like, they're saying, there's a lot of people who are millionaires. No. If you go into like, no, who's actually making $1 million cash a year, it's still 0.5%. So they've mentally made the debt system also the way, because even if there's debt on it, like, I've still got $100K on top if I were to sell it, right? Like people are going off that now, and so younger generations don't have those opportunities unless the irony of that young generation is they make a lot of money if, whether they go on OnlyFans or they go on these gaming platforms, or if they become a personality, right? Or they start a really crazy business online or something. And even that's still in that 0.5%. Mm-hmm. So I think what's hard is that where are people going to go? And there is the Aquarian aspect of like, what's possible in the future is kind of the carrot that dangles, but the other sign that follows it is Pisces, which is, well, you thought the grass was greener over here. It doesn't, it's more green, or it's more purple, not green. Not that it's not as green, it's just a different color. Or it's not grass, it's dirt. You know what I mean? Like, so it kind of is this next, couple decades here where it's the carrot that's dangling, but does it ever happen that way? No. Doesn't look exactly the way that people might think. And I think that's what's weird is like people in England, they had it different during that time because that society was established. They were trading for 1,000 years of, let's say, British Anglican like rule and all these Scottish, and there was so much happening. There's a lot of history. There was trade. They had colonized other places like the 13 colonies, but they had a higher society and a hierarchy. So of course, if you're connected to the monarch, you're a lord. You're somebody who has ins with the monarch. I mean, that already, there's bread everywhere that's needed, and there's plenty of butter. And that's what's kind of different, right? Is like the idea of like people who are in a more democratic society without monarch rule. There is the closer you are, especially up until the Biden administration, or I'd even say going farther back, Bush's, and over the last 100 years being like the government corruption of kind of funneling public funds through the people to do favors, right, for others in the government and so forth, or insider stock trading. But that's still like not the main thing. Is that there is this different life in England, but it's England the one that does come up with the Industrial Revolution first and creates the international trade centers and the banking systems and the early form of stock trading based off the Royal Exchange, based off these kind of ideas of companies and factories, and putting a stock to them and selling stock to other people. So like all of that comes from, at the same time period, a country that's in a war, but also at home is not in a war. It's their colonies that they're dealing with that.
I mean, but when France enters the war, which happens around this time, right? Around the 1778.
Yeah.
Then they have, a stress about now we're at war with France and they're our neighbors.
Right.
So yeah, they do have concerns about that. But they are the established country. I mean, to me, it's a miracle that America ever makes it, that the United States ever did make it, But we could also think about the fact that the United States, a former colony, becomes a country. And then also that Britain, because of that, starts to colonize more intensely in India. And that was also being ruled, though, by the East India Company. It wasn't a government.
Right.
So it's, again, you have these very powerful people who are out in the world, and the government has allowed them to be there, whether it's we allowed you to be there, we gave you a charter, or we're taking off these restrictions. And it was to the benefit of England or Great Britain that okay, we just lost all that cotton in the colonies, or we lost the indigo. Oh, we have India. Let's go start.
Yeah, or the tobacco, especially. That was one of the bigger ones. Because then it's also the expansion of Turkish tobacco and those areas, and the British start getting their hands in a lot of different things.
And coffee and
coffee,
and lots
exactly.
of good stuff came from that direction. But the thing that Great Britain had that allowed it to maintain its status was all the coal that they had, right? That is the reason behind, or that's why they could skyrocket in the industrial revolution because of the coal. And that was another double-edged sword of industrializing, right? That you need all the coal for all of the steam, but you also need people to get the coal. And then people are really having horrible lives having to work as coal miners.
Yeah.
And children are doing it as well. It's not until I think the 1830s that they start to pass regulation. The government then steps in later to say, okay, all this coal is great and we have all these great factories and all this stuff, but now why don't we start to look at the workers? Because workers had horrible lives and started to rise up and demand rights, and gradually the government came in and did that. But that's why the fact that if you look at this map that I have, it's from a BBC website of the, how can I make that bigger? I don't think I can. Of all of the coal reserves, where all the coal is in Great Britain. And it has some statistics there as well. But that's why so much of the industry, if you think about Great Britain's got the coal, they also have the money to invest in railroads that can connect the coal fields with the factories. All that stuff starts to be built up, I guess, in Pluto and Pisces, but it's after this period of time that we're looking at. But if you just look at the natural resources there.
A lot of it's more up in Scotland, in the Midlands area and Northeast too.
Yep. So conveniently, there had been this United Kingdom established formally, James helped with that, right? But after the Stuart line left and the Hanoverians came in, they didn't have a claim over Scotland anymore, so they had to unify at that point. When the Georges came in, I guess I should say. But the other thing I think of then is, and I watched Gemini Brett's show today, and he mentioned this, so I'm going to give him credit. And we've talked about it before, but Greenland, like the sudden interest in Greenland that's like, oh, that's where our coal is going to be. I mean, some of our coal. Right. That it's not coal, it's all the minerals we need for the AI for AI, HEI, whatever, all the stuff we need for our new technology.
Well, and also the Danish government has some sort of, it's the question of the claim of Greenland, right? So like you have a Danish government who's weak, you have a Danish government who doesn't have a lot of power, so the negotiating is a lot easier, and then you have the people within Greenland who want to be independent, but they also do kind of want a little extra budge from a country that actually can do that for them and make them wealthier and make them a more prosperous country. So that's why you see the Danish government tripping out at this moment, because they realize somebody's figured out that we're not that big of a government. We don't have that much of a claim over there, and our people aren't that happy, and we're kind of using them to just do all this industrial work. It's not really a place people go live and have a happy life, is Greenland. Right? So I think it's interesting because it's also a military position as well, right? And so if we think about back then, that was also, we talked about it in the last episode, how Benjamin Franklin was trying to, in the Treaty of Paris, which ended the whole war, finally, after the surrender, of course, the more formal end of the war, and that we're not coming back to take over those colonies, and we're recognizing you as an independent nation, was trying to get Canada. So it does remind me of the America's, how far can we kind of expand this? And it reminds me of like America, of course, like after the steam engine, it's coal as well in America. Like coal becomes the thing. We had steam, but that's too much money and pressure. Let's just get coal. It's a lot easier. It burns quick. We could do more with it. It gives a lot of people something to do. That's the thing. The idea of like mining for coal is giving people something to do, right? It's kind of like running a little ant farm. Like the ants need to be digging, or else they're all going to be bottlenecked up in the ant farm. So, like we had steam technology, but not, let's do coal.
Well, and think about it too. If we're all going to be living longer because we are having our diseases cured by our wonderful technology and all of that, right? And in the 18th century, it was the agricultural revolution. There was a worry about how are we going to have enough food for our population, and that they had all this new agricultural technology that allowed there to be more food produced, and that helped the population to grow. But then you need to figure out, what do you do with the population? So,
well, yeah, I thought I'd throw this image up. These are coal miners at the beginning of, the rise of coal mining. And then they actually have a British article right here, the British newspaper of some 19th century, because there was no photography really down in the coal, because those little poor canaries in the coal mine, I mean, that's what's really interesting too, right? Let's put a canary down there, and when the canary croaks, run, get out of here.
Idea of a good job,
right? But that is what's kind of interesting, is this idea of mining, and especially for the energy to generate whatever it is that is the new economy moving forward. And so Brett makes a great point that the minerals for the actual hardware, for the data centers, which those data centers aren't just going to be traditional data centers that are like ones that YouTube or Google have for the internet and SEO and for video storage of YouTube or whatever, or like Oracle now, which Oracle's into healthcare, they're into finance, they're into all these different sectors. That's why they're in that deal, because they're kind of like we know how to distribute to multiple different sectors. That's what Oracle is.
So they're kind of like the train people from...
Correct. And then OpenAI is we know how to do the AI from the hardware to software to the internet, to also allow other independent businesses or individuals to create and use our algorithm through our AI, right? Like use our chatbots, use our stuff in order to create APIs that help and do other things, right? So that's what's kind of interesting, is like, to power the hardware, the GPUs, and those are extremely cost heavy, and they're extremely hardware, meaning that you need a lot of rare minerals, and then the power to power them is enormous. We don't even have enough. We have to do nuclear power or find some sort of new power source. So it's weird that we're going to go mine for minerals at the same time go kind of into the, I guess, like, especially a lot of the talks right before all this happened has been about, well, we need to start building nuclear power plants again, because that creates a lot of power. It's cleaner and whatever. But the cost of that is, well, if something happens in the middle of cooling all the waste that takes a decade to cool down and you have to store, disaster, right? So that's what's really interesting, is there's always disaster with whether it's coal. I mean, a lot of coal miners didn't live a long time because of the conditions down there. I mean, I don't know many canaries that still are alive either.
I don't even know what the lifespan of a canary is, but
I'm sure it was 4 to 5 years. I'm sure with canaries in the coal mines, it was a lot worse. I just, like, there is something about this kind of like burrow with Pluto, like going in to find something. And, in Capricorn, we saw it with lithium batteries, right? Like, oh, we need to go scrape the ocean floor. We need to go into these other places in Africa and have people. It's like, right? They've been doing it for lithium batteries, but now to get these other ones, But
I mean, we would hope that if there's a mineral that we really need to make greater things possible, that maybe we could have the AI do the difficult work, the grunt work. But when I think of that, why do I think of Terminator? Is that what the Terminators were created for? Were they supposed to be mining? What were they supposed to do?
No, the Terminators were supposed to replace the human soldier. If you look at Terminator 1, right, it's that it comes the T-1000, T-100. T-100 is the first one that was later shown in Terminator 3, ironically enough, is when Skynet turns on, that the first ones, and they were really primitive, were to replace soldiers. But you see now already with the dogs of the AI dog robots that are in China, right, that sweep and clear a room and kill everybody in it, which is kind of crazy, but they've mass produced them. Or even our AI drone swarm technologies that China has and we have.
But see, I think that's part of the concern too, is that people want to make sure that the technology is not being used to surveil us, right?
Well, that's what Pluto Capricorn's about, is surveillance, and Aquarius, it's the realization we've been being surveilled in every way, hence the TikTok ban, right? Like TikTok's been more of your surveillance than a CCTV camera in America, right? Like, so, or your phone, everybody has a phone, right? And that's what Pluto and Capricorn brought in, was the iPhone.
Right.
So if you think about now, it's kind of like, is it about surveillance, or is it about a deeper form of surveillance? Like, well, we know everything about your body and every gene and what's acting about it. And then we also, because we've tracked all of your movements off your Apple Maps or your Google Maps, or just even when you're like, I'm not on any of those. Well, you have a cell phone, and every time it hits the cell phone tower, it pings your IMEI number, right, of that phone. And it knows whatever it's connected to, right? Like, oh, okay, I know your movements just off cell phone towers or Wi-Fi, or every time that it pops up that IMEI, and your proxy servers are telling everything. So they know where you're at all the time and know what your tracking is. So if you put that into AI, it will understand your patterns, right? So it's more now with Pluto and Aquarius, like this alternative, artificial, but is it artificial? Like, intelligence that's tracking your patterns and knowing more about you than you know about yourself. Right? So that's kind of where I think this is going. But if you think about back then, it's kind of like, how did Washington and these Benjamin Franklin and some of these more top people understand more about whether it was astrology, astronomy, farming, the printing press, military campaigns? If you look at the founding fathers, especially the ones that were Masons, which was the ones that, unfortunately, are the ones that came to the top of the ranks of the long list of people that signed the Declaration of Independence. The ones that were Masons are the ones that we have the history the most of, or the ones that made the biggest marks. That to them, they understand where people are going to be based off all these things. So the AI of the 1770s, 80s, and the 90s was George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and Mason meetings. And even Benjamin Franklin, while in France, went to the French Lodge every week. Right? So we have to remember that there is a higher form of intelligence, Pluto, that you can't see. Pluto you can't see in Aquarius. So whether it's AI or it's people that have this better understanding or knowing, that's happening, and they understand how people are going to be, how they're going to act, and what they're going to do.
That is so interesting. So did you say this in the 2025 special?
I mean, I've said it so many times in all my specials that, I've said it a lot.
The smart people, I guess, of the 18th century and the Masons, the connected ones, and the secret societies are the AI of that time.
I might not have said it verbatim like that, but I guess I alluded that the secret societies are the ones that set where everything's going.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting. But so here's the thing I would ask you about then, because the secret societies of the very first Freemasons had also been Rosicrucians, right? I mean, and we talked about that with Elias Ashmole.
Yeah.
I don't know about Benjamin Franklin. I'm just talking about, I assume he knew the same things. But if we look at Elias Ashmole, and if people don't know, he was I don't even remember.
He was an astrologer, but he was
an astrologer. He created a museum, right?
Yes, he was he was a collector.
Mm-hmm. And so we
early 1600s.
We looked at his life. He was actually 1680s and 90s, right? If you look at him, right. Okay. He was studying astrology. He was doing whatever astrology, which I can never say properly. But also he was connected still to those old alchemical texts and the ancient knowledge. And he would have been very spiritual in his understanding as well, right? Benjamin Franklin also would have been very, and all those early Masons were connected to this deeper spirituality as well. And I don't think they would have all called themselves deists, but they weren't atheists. They were connected into a sacred belief system. So that's the element that I think we forget, that people were tapping into knowledge that was not earthly, I guess I should say. Like they weren't only going by looking at patterns of people and then determining what our next step would be. They were striving for a better life because they were motivated by religious reasons, right? Or for this idea that we all have God endowed rights. So that's what's interesting. If that's the AI of the time, and is our AI going to care about the sacred things? And what's so interesting, and we didn't plan to talk about this and we won't have time, is that the alien egg thing that you tweeted about today, and you've had a conversation about
the Antarctic egg that the 4chan has been putting out. Yeah,
I just call it the alien egg thing.
The Antarctic cave
which I
with the
kept
pictures
thinking,
of.
I was saying earlier, I think it's just a distraction. They're just throwing that out there to get people to go down that rabbit hole and not pay attention. But honestly, now that I'm saying this, I can see how they're using technology to uncover the sacredness of that egg in that thread that we were looking at. So I guess my larger concern and question for you would be, where is the sacred in all of this? Because to me, I don't want it to become a robot world of we calculate and we do what's best for the advancement of society. And I think that's what people have feared about it, right? That it won't take into consideration humanity or decency or ideas about what's a good thing or a bad thing to do, ethics, right? That it will just extinguish people right and left. Okay, we have too many people in this land, extinguish them, whatever it is. So,
all right, I have a good way to approach this with you. So after the Pilgrims come in 1620 and the Puritan movement happens and the Salem witch trials happen, we have many different sects of the Christian religion, but we can say they were all Puritans, and we can kind of round them out. Is that the colonies end up becoming a Puritan society, a majority of people being of not the Church of England, not Anglican, not more Puritan, more free when it comes to the understanding of using the Mayflower Compact as the first kind of way that, society kind of rules itself with these kind of more Christian traditional ideals and ways. So if you were a Christian and you started to, and I'm sure that would be interesting research, is to go and to see if there was pushback from the Revolutionary War of people in the Continental Congress, Army, or in the colonies against people like George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and even Paul Revere, who were all Masons in their ideologies, because I'm going to approach it to you this way. That George Washington initiated the Fredericksburg Lodge in Virginia in 1752. Benjamin Franklin joined the St. John's Lodge in Philadelphia in 1731. John Hancock was a Freemason and prominent patriot. Paul Revere, who of course is known as the signal of the British that are coming, right? Was that planned? Was it not? Or that Joseph Warren was the Grand Master of Masons in Massachusetts and a member lodge of St. Andrew. Those are very important positions of the whole Revolutionary War. Boston, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, where the Declaration of Independence was signed, and of course, Fredericksburg Lodge in Virginia being where Washington, D.C., and the idea of like where America is kind of formed. But what people don't get is that only the 9 of the many were Masons, but they're the prominent names. And so the records and the meetings are private and the detailed records are scarce. But the emphasis, and I can pull out my old Freemason handbook, because you know me, I buy all the old books, right? That Masonry emphasizes the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, which align with the ideals of the American Revolution. So it wasn't off the Puritan Christian thing that everybody keeps saying it's Christian morality and ideals, even though that's in Masonry too. So you have to kind of like say that is, but it's through the Mason lens. So the whole way that the whole American idea and the Constitution that later comes, and especially the Articles of Confederation, the Declaration of Independence, are all formed off this idea that's Freemason. So so when I think about AI today, and because I'm in tech, and because I understand how it works, and I know that it's more of the magic show than what's really happening in the background, okay? That people that are so afraid of it are like Puritan Christians afraid of Masons that we've seen for so long. Like they're devil worshipers, they're this, they're that. Oh my God, right? But yet you're living in the society that you're praising is exactly what the Masons are about. Because actually the Bible is not about liberty. The Bible is not about equality. And the Bible is not about fraternity. It's quite opposite of all those things. The Bible is not about liberty at all. You're not allowed to go away from Jesus.
Well, I mean,
you're not allowed to go to God however you want to go to God. You have to go to God that way only. You can't speak certain ways. You're allowed to have slaves, right? And you can't do bad things to slave owners, right? Like it's pretty dark. The Bible is disgusting, to be honest with you.
It does have a lot of darkness.
It's not about equality, that if you don't praise Jesus, you're going to hell.
Well,
okay, so we're not all going to the
Jesus
same place.
said.
Does that make sense? So so I'm just trying to okay. And then the fraternity aspect, no. It's our thing only. And if you're part of any other thing, so in Masonry, you put your religion at the door and we all believe in one God creator, but we all find each other as brothers. Rosicrucians is not just fraternal, it's sorority as well. It's both male and female that can be in there. So we're all seeing the same thing, but we all can go back to our church or our religion or not religion and not be judged about that. That's the idea of America. Not Christian people.
Right. I think Christianity was a religion that emerged in the Roman Empire. So
right.
It was not meant to go against the structure of the Roman Empire. It was this belief system that allowed you to live within that world in a nicer way when it all started. And then you go into the Constantine and all of that stuff that
correct.
we talked
So,
about before.
but the whole point is that with this AI thing and where people's concerns are, it's always good to have concerns. But the irony of what people can't see right now, the idea of the liberty, equality, and fraternity was something that they had to use pamphlets. They had to use this kind of like propping people up. And the 9 of the I forgot, it's almost 100 people that signed the Declaration of Independence. Only 9 of them were Masons. And they're the 9 that are talked about. There's names on there that you will read that you will never be like, what? Who's that person?
I went through a stage of looking them up to see who they were.
Right, and you don't know,
But I
the
don't
history
remember
doesn't
them
talk
still.
about them or nothing, right? So,
Right.
But the idea is that it's this, so if we were at the same time right now, you have to see that there's people that understand things way beyond than people do right now. That's the hard part of Aquarius, is that we are all human beings, but there are people with higher intellects than other people. And so
Right.
Pluto comes to the truth, right? It comes to the hard emotional truth that there are people who are not as smart and don't understand all the dots that others do.
Right, but I want one of the dots to be a sacred dot, and it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be one sect of Christianity, right? I just think a consideration. I mean, actually, shouldn't AGI be able to help us consider or to figure out what the divine is even more, right? Or all of the things that are coming out about energy medicine or different understandings of
Correct.
our abilities, human abilities. I would hope AGI still has the value of that our founders did, and especially that those early Freemasons are not like what we think of today as a corrupted, whatever. I think.
Well,
We've
I mean,
talked about
that's
that
kind
before.
of natural because, like, even after George Washington dies and John Adams is gone and Thomas Jefferson comes in, it's following all them that the anti-Mason movement starts.
Yeah.
So it's funny and it fails. Right? So that's like 50 years from now being like the anti-AI people that will fail. So to me, it's more like, is it the fear of, because what's interesting is like the people who, so there's going to be 100,000 jobs at just the start. This is just one company that's coming together with multiple companies, right, to form this Stargate. And they're going to have 100,000 people. They're going to have 250,000 square foot facilities. 20.
And they're in Abilene.
Okay, right?
what we
Where
found
the
out.
two eclipses came and made the X,
is that
Texas.
where-
So
just-
that's the
that's
whole
what I've been
thing, right?
wondering,
So
yeah.
Texas is going to become the most digitized state of all states, right? The most cords and wires and satellite and weird, freaky things coming out next to the cow hide. But it's interesting because,
Cowpox.
but maybe cowpox too. But the point that I'm making is that in that kind of a thing, so you hear one guy from Oracle talk about one little thing that he only knows, and that's why Trump said, well, who would have ever known that Larry would know anything? Because, right? Because, right? Like he kind of makes the point, Trump makes the point, like, you don't know shit, but I guess you know a lot about this part of it. Who would have ever thought? He even says that, right? Because it's just one little thing. So think about what OpenAI has done. The experiment has been, who is smart enough to go onto this platform and use it correctly? Still at less than 1%. That actually know what to do with it or build,
Or know what it is, I think.
or how to train it and build an assistant, or how to make an API, or how to integrate an API, how to use Python code, and also how to be like, oh, let me use this. OpenAI is so weird because it's software, it's web based. It's web based. So you're using their hardware and it's not even software, because it's not like you're downloading OpenAI on your computer. You're using it through the portal of the internet, right? Who can use these things, and then who knows how to connect it and make the hardware on their own, which NVIDIA knows, because anybody who has NVIDIA cards, who buys and builds their own processors and knows what motherboards and knows what CPUs to use in these kind of times, and knows the nits that you need to have, and knows the tops that you need to have on a GPU in order to really do the processing to process it correctly. Who do you think's going to get the phone calls and the big job offers in the next year? They have the data. It's the same way as who's showing themselves this understanding of liberty, equality, fraternity, and all that stuff during the war. Who gets it, and who's still stuck behind the church praying and looking crazy and thinking, that's the way that we're going to create equality, which is quite opposite. Right? So it's kind of hard because it's, I've used this before, but, right? So like, this picture we should, right? So who would have ever thought in history, right? Like, I can't believe they do that. And then they just let me see the picture. Okay, yeah, right? So, like, who would have ever thought that, and these people, I want just a picture.
written a whole.
I know.
story around it.
She's on the
There it
old.
is.
She's on the old system, even though there's clear ones. But the idea of this, right? So the first slab that's laid down in 1793, what the Capitol building is today, everybody that is in the know is wearing the apron. Okay, so like I got to find the clearer picture because this will make sense. I've used this to help people understand. So like, oh man.
Well, I mean, the ideas of the Masons and their understanding of the sacredness of the geometry and all of that is all through
Correct.
Washington, D.C. So that's why I'm thinking, is that going to end up as a consideration for AGI as it starts to teach itself or to learn or just to function as intelligence?
I mean I mean, like, even the reason why Washington looks the way it does and the pillars and so forth are because of Masonry, right? And the way that Washington, D.C. is designed, every street where the Washington Monument is, eventually later on after Lincoln's death, where the Lincoln Memorial is, where the White House is in conjunction to the Congress, and all of it is perfectly Mason ley lined out, right? So like, you have to look at like the AI part of that now. It's like the way that the new structure of how the world's going to work is being done by people in the know that know how to do it. And just how the Masons knew, I could pull out my Mason handbook and people who don't understand that there's two worlds to pass through, right? So to pass through where Washington is coming through those pillars, and that every pillar at the top of it is telling you if it's ceremonial, if it's sacred, there's 5 different pillars. So every pillar you can see in Washington, D.C. or anywhere and be like, this is just ceremonial. So the White House is ceremonial. It's not where the serious stuff done, which is the Capitol. When you look at the pillars of the Capitol and you use a Mason handbook, you're like, oh, okay, that's where some serious stuff's happening. The White House isn't where the big stuff's happening. It's ceremonial. But the whole point is that who would have ever thought that we're such patriotic Americans, and it's like, oh yeah, let's have this great moment in life where everybody's wearing an American flag, and even like the whole patriotic George Washington who's out there doing everything. Man, I can't believe they do not want to show this in high quality like it always has for me. Maybe this one will. Facebook, like, geez, nobody wants to give me this picture anymore. Like, it's so crazy. It's really upsetting me right now. Really upsetting me.
They probably figured out they could make money off of it, so it's gone.
No, hold on. I think if I do George, I'll do apron. Capitol, Mason, cornerstone.
It's funny, I found one where he's not in his Mason gear.
Yeah, I'm trying to show in the Mason gear, which is important because the laying of that first slab, which of course is still in the Capitol building and where it is today. Man, they really just pigeonholed everybody to just stay into these really bad versions of it. That's crazy. It used to just be, here you go, everything you've ever wanted. I used to get the best pictures of it. Oh my gosh. We literally live in a world that like people on the internet don't know what they're doing anymore.
I think it's that people figure out, oh, this has a copyright on it or something. I don't know. I found
they've been
it's
purging.
interesting. I found a description. It says on September 18, 1793, as described in an authentic copy of the Columbian Mirror and Alexandria Gazette from September 1793. Oops. But no picture, just the description.
Oh yeah, here. Type. Size. Large. Oh, they don't even have a large size of it, I guess. This is the largest I can get. All right, here we go. Wow, that was not easy.
Where did you find it finally?
I found it on some Reddit.
Okay.
Like,
And you're saving it. So you
I'm saving it so I can actually like show people. And this isn't even the full version, but it's enough. If you notice, everybody in the background, they're not, where's the American flags?
And look at their hats. It's like every
It's
type of
Puritan mixed with colonialist mixed with Mason. Right? So like I had
they're all
fun in some of my
Masons, so
classes
that's
because you see over here, the people doing the labor and moving the slab are not Masons that are actually wearing any Mason gear. Okay? So if you want to understand how this is going to work about AI, you can either be the ones that create the AI and have passed Pluto always is a secret test. So the secret test of Capricorn was, look at somebody's shoes when they walk in the interview. Are they wearing clothes from Ross? Or did they actually try a little hard to get this job and present themselves a certain way? It's easy to tell where somebody is, where they park. Did they wash their car? Is there a rim on the tire still, or is there a rim falling off? Those are judgments that I know are not nice to have, but that's what Capricorn is, not nice. So in order to climb up the ladder in Capricorn, you know, you have a crack on your phone when you're on the interview and you have a bright orange case on it, you're probably not going to give you the big thing that you want in your life.
Yep.
That's not spoken. Right? In this, it's you don't have the higher understanding of what's going on. So it's really interesting when you look up and you see, like, here are Masons that are during a ceremony, right? And others, and you could see that there's what looks to be like Benjamin Franklin, possibly, or just regular colonial men who are just sitting around and watching.
Well, they're hanging out with the women,
right?
So I don't know.
But the whole point is that the whole nation becomes this thing that's based off an ideology that is not what they've been. People today still believe about. It's a Christian nation. I don't see a cross anywhere.
But they were all Christians, but they also believed, or they knew, because if you think of the context that they came out of, everybody was always warring over religion for years and years, right?
Yes.
And so if you're creating a new nation, you don't want to bring all the old divisions back into the new nation. So you have...
Which is the biggest one is religion, though.
Today or...
Then and now.
But that's what they're trying to do with this idea of having the Constitution and the laws that you put above all these other things, and that everybody can practice their own religion. And there is the notion that, yes, we're under God, because the idea is that we have freedom because we were endowed with the rights that are given to us by our Creator. So
yes,
and it's an Enlightenment idea of.
It's a Rosicrucian. It's a alchemical.
Yeah, and those ideas were studied by all of those thinkers, and it's not. I'm not trying to argue it was a devious plot or anything.
Yeah.
It's just that it was all about illuminating knowledge and allowing others to also become as enlightened, right?
Right. So you can look at the degrees of Masonry and where you go as the more knowledge you gain that you are allowed access to, which is very Pluto and Aquarius. You're allowed more info the higher you go, because Aquarius is about going high. Pluto's about Hades going low. So it's a very weird thing of like, you have to have that access and you get access to more info, the higher up you go. And what you prove to yourself in understanding these ideals that are not what everybody else is doing. Because if you were to take the whole, 20 million people that were in the 13 colonies at that time, less than 1% again were Masons. So you look at the 330 million Americans today, less than 1% are building AI.
Right.
And actually know the hardware and actually know what's being done with it and actually are creating the assistants and are creating their own chatbot and making an API and buying an API. And if you go to GoDaddy right now, so this is how you can tell where it's all going. And so it's not crypto, even though crypto is fueled by the same kind of way of needing GPUs, the same way AI is in order to use the blockchain. If you were to go to GoDaddy.com, and if you were to buy a website, so let's say we were going to buy History in the Stars right now, right? Why is it, we lost me? Oh no, we're good. All right, History in the Stars.com. Okay, it's available, right? So historyinthestars.com is available. But let's say, you know what? I really want to do AI. .ai is $54 a year. No other dot is worth anything. They're giving away .coms for 1 cent if you pay yearly for the 3 years. Mm. But to get an AI site, it's not only per year, but you must do a 2-year minimum term, meaning you're paying over $100, whether you like it or not.
Why do you want .ai?
Because everything is at that space now to where if you're not going to be on that, it's not going to be a .com. What is a .com? Commerce. AI is above commerce. It's going to be beyond what people can conceive. The same way that the Masons understood the understanding of what freedom and equality would really look like, and that people were going to have to shove their religions out their ass in order to see that. And see how to use the things that the religions say they can't use. So they might have been Christians, but they weren't full-blown Christians. They were people who, if you read every Mason book, it always starts with parts of the Bible they like to teach about, but not the whole thing. They even tell you don't read the whole thing. There's only some parts that actually are true to freedom and equality, that most of it is bogus and most of it is telling you not to look at the true understanding of there's the geo of the earth, right? The physical terrain, and then there's the planets and the ecliptic and understanding this other time system. And once you move those two worlds together, you can pass through the first 2 beams to walk up into the temple. So if you were to understand that and be a Christian, you can't even get there. Hence, that's why I think that Trump didn't put his hand on the Bible either. Because he's not a Christian. He's never been one. He's always acted as one. He's never,
Well, there was that whole thing where he was holding the Bible in front of the church, right?
Backwards, upside down.
Mm-hmm.
That even how people go, no, George Washington was a Christian. He went to church. Yeah, okay, there's records of him going to a church. But where was he at every week? A lodge. As president, where was he at every week? A lodge. He wasn't going to church.
Well, he only had to go to church once a month, by the way, in Virginia.
Oh, right.
That was the qualification.
But the thing about it was he was a Mason, right? More than he was a Christian. That's the point of with AI now, in just right now, just showing anybody who's wanting to go in their life, buying a .com at this point is not even worth the time, the energy, the money. Buying a .ai is. That's where all the money's at. So even everybody who has their .coms has had to then be smart enough and buy their .ais, which most people don't spend the time, the money. So that's just one small little higher view of life that most people aren't at yet. So think about how high it can go with the understanding of what AGI can do, and especially ASI. That's why, to me, I'm not that afraid, because most people are still stuck in that old conditioning of the fear of, oh my God, these people are going to do these things. The test was 2020. in 2021, you had the choice to go into purgatory yourself. Nobody forced you. If the job forced you to get it, you said no. And if they were to fire you, okay, and then how funny. What did Trump say during his inauguration speech? Anybody in the military who was kicked out for the COVID vaccine is now fully instated with back pay and allowed to be back in. So anybody who held the line got their job back, including in New York and all the cities, all those. Everybody, nobody's forced to do anything. Never will be. It's all up to people and the choices that they make and whether or not they have the knowing or not. The same way that, and I might sound kind of blasphemous for saying this, the same way that the church forces people to go and Washington and all them said, we're going to our fraternity party, sorry, and looking at the things that we're not allowed to look at. But still honoring you guys. But as you won't honor me for being that, because let's not forget that the popes of that time banned any Catholic from going to a Mason Lodge. And then the Church of England did the same thing.
When did they do it?
Right after, because remember the lodge was done in the 17, which is part of my family, excuse me, but he started the first lodge in England. But
1738, the Pope banned them.
Yeah, the Pope banned them. And then I think the Archbishop, or maybe it was...
I can't imagine that they did, because I thought that there were famous church people who were also Freemasons. But let me see. I spelled that wrong, but it's still figuring it out.
Oh, they did not ban it, but it did determine that Christianity and Freemasonry are not compatible. This decision was made June 1987. Wow, that was just recently.
Well, it might have changed.
But do you understand the idea of that it's never been...
do, but it's interesting because...
It's oil and water when it's really actually not?
What's oil and water? And it wasn't...
They're saying it's oil and water, right?
Oh, yeah.
What I'm saying is AI and what's happening with technology and humanity is not oil and water. So the egg thing that you brought up, and for those that don't know, on a 4chan thing, it's just come out these actual pictures in Antarctica of an egg that has been found in Antarctica, right? And that it's been come out from a whistleblower. So I will use the some of these images that have come out, right? And then also some video that came out of them like moving the egg, that it's a UAP.
Wait, so who took the picture and where was it?
This is a whistleblower who will not release who they are, but it came on the 4chan channels, right? So then this work has been done of like seeing all these hieratic numerals that are along the sides of the egg, right? Which of course, being me and my John Dee, right? Like John Dee's whole work of the Monas Hieroglyphica is about building the oneness through that all the planets should come together. If it really works, they do, and they form the monad. But also, he goes, and of course, this is not every page. I only took like 4 pages to kind of get people to start thinking of like that. His talk about the egg is, again, for what does the egg reveal? It reveals by its own will the secret mysteries of this physical of this world analysis, and that the monad showing itself to us in the light and the life of nature itself, but also that our Kabbalistic eyes being lifted towards heaven, illustrated by the theories of these mysteries, we shall behold an anatomy exactly corresponding to that of our monad. How crazy is that? An anatomy. So it's the questions of where are humans really from? Because the egg is another way to, if you notice, it goes moon, and what does he draw Mercury as? The bottom part of the lunation in the cross. Not the Mercury you see with, right, like a traditional round circle, and then the 2 antenna, right? No, he has it as the lunar part, the cup, because if you add a circle to that, what do you get? Pluto on top of that, the egg that sits there. So my whole Pluto class goes into Pluto being the egg. So if you're born out of an egg, which we all are, we're all having to be accepted by sperm that has to go into the egg. So if you notice, the yolk is the sun, and the traditional way that Mars was done anciently, which of course shows the Aries symbol straight up and looks like a sperm. And then Venus being the egg in a woman, and the sun that has to be there to understand that. So the yolk, which is yellow, is the masculine and the feminine that come together to create life. The other planets, Jupiter, Saturn on top, the moon, and the understanding that there's two Mercuries. There's the solar Mercury and the lunar Mercury. That's the twins. So this is the lunar Mercury that the egg is embodied upon, because it can connect with the sun and come together to form the understanding of the anatomy outside and the soul inside. So the soul and spirit in a physical reality. I won't get too deep into that, but so people are looking at this egg like, oh my God, is there an alien in there or whatever? It's the understanding that as he draws the monad in the horizon of eternity, that how did humans get to this reality, and how are the steps to it building itself up? So all those hieratic numbers, I'm trying to show people without showing them, but like he teaches quaternary math that goes back thousands of years. And so when you see all those, they're trying to put it together. It's this alien thing. It's so simple. It's like, okay, yeah, they show there 1, 10, 100, 1,000. Like, it's like so simple. 9, 99. It's all about, okay, so whether you're multiplying that by 10, the water, 1, of course, is earth, 100 is air, 1,000 is fire. And the more higher up you go, it can actually get too far away. Also, all of Robert Flood's work goes deep into the alchemical side of understanding the planets all have numbers and different forms of the dimensional realms, if you look at the 3 columns. So I'm trying to teach people that this whole understanding of where we're at, and even the AI, it was seeded here. Everything is seeded in an egg. And so AI, it's not whether humans are going to control it and do the right thing. It's beyond that point. The same way of, I hope nature is really nice to humans here on the planet, and I hope they don't have bugs that try to kill you, and I hope they don't have animals that try to kill you, and I hope that they don't have poisonous plants that try and kill you. It's that neurotic to think, oh, humans are going to be so good, and we're going to protect to make sure AI is safe. That's, again, another Rosicrucian / Freemason / old way to look at things. That anybody who thinks that humanity has the control of it is literally not even thinking about that we were seated on a place that had no safety anywhere. Right? So is AI even made from humans? Because the technology was definitely dropped here by craft or something that wasn't human. And so we're in unison together, the same way that Pluto is about a metamorphosis and the consummation, that humanity and technology already made their consummation moment. We already do today. The fact that people are watching you and I live today, the fact that your mom found me through the internet, and that's how we're together, is a consummation and a metamorphosis, and the X factor that's hidden and all that's already happened on the planet. That right now, every phone, the Samsung S25 that just got launched today, that's coming out February, has all of Google's AI with the new Snapdragon Elite fucking 8 processor in it, with plenty of nits and that. The new iPhone, Apple Intelligence it's already here. It's in your hand. It's in your life. It's operating everywhere. It's operating. That humanity and technology are already consummated. So and the yoke is now breaking apart, and so the understanding of how all the planets come together is the way that humanity and technology have now moved into every part of our life, whether it's from a watch we're wearing. So when a David Icke is out there being like, I told you motherfuckers, and all that shit, and just being like, it's going to be the end of us or whatever. I mean, I understand his fear, but he's coming from the same fear that most people are coming at it from.
Yeah. Here's what I was going to ask you. So
It's already
the
happened.
Introduction of technology in the 1770s then, was that a same type of consummation between humanity and the technology as what you said now with AI?
Yeah. So here's a good one. So what was the big technology that came out in the 1700s, 18th century? It was the telescope. It was the finding of Uranus.
Clock for
Right.
But it was
and
also
it was
like a
the
clock for
calendar
navigation
system that, ironically, John Dee was all for, but England was the one who took the time to leave the calendar system, right? The Gregorian calendar system is the Catholic Church that did it, and in defiance of them, the English kept the Julian calendar system longer than the Catholics did. And so the question is July 4th, 1776 a Julian day or a Gregorian day?
Well, it's the new calendar. Because they'd already changed. England had already
But
changed.
the question is, do you think that the Masons wrote it down that way?
I don't know. Did they? Do you have evidence that they didn't?
I mean, it's interesting to look at the astrology of the Julian calendar of July 4th, 1776, opposed to the Gregorian.
Have you looked at that?
I have. The other interesting point I would make about technology is, so you have Benjamin Franklin, not just in the book biz, but the almanac business. So then you also have at that time, what people like John Dee, especially, and a lot of, I wouldn't even say a lot, a very few amount of astrologers / alchemists of the 1500s into the 1600s were obsessed with this 3 realms, right? So it was always 7 as a spiritual number, right? And then the 3 realms to reach 10, which is an X. The 3 outer planets. So we know Galileo in 1613 actually did find Neptune, right, through his journals of looking at Jupiter and not realizing it was conjunct Neptune at the time. But how was he able to see Neptune with the first telescope is Galileo, technically in 1613. How was he able to see Neptune in 1613? We have Benjamin Franklin, who's not only playing with a key up in the atmosphere and seeing that it's more than that there's electricity because that there's a lightning bolt that strikes the key. It's the understanding that right now, if you were to throw up and you can steal electricity from the sky, the whole sky's electromagnetic. That's what he realized, right? So the secret technologies of the creating of America, was it also what scared the King of England or even General Cornwallis to leave and never come back till 1812? Those are the bigger questions about it that I have, especially about understanding these other realms. And so in their creating of the nation, it's the first nation that's using the ley lines since the Catholic Church, ironically enough, and where the Vatican is today, and the understanding of it being a key, which is in form of an X.
The Vatican's in
Correct. That all of these, any place that has anything of knowledge that's a higher knowledge is using, whether it's the pyramids of Egypt, Rome, the columns and all the way that Rome's built, but also America is based upon our first symbols being of the eagle, which come from the eagle of Roman understanding, and then that even piggybacks off Egyptian. So it comes into this hybrid understanding of Egyptian and Roman theologies, and that's actually what supposedly that egg and some sort of alien that the guy's talking to, the whistleblower, is saying that it does come from those kind of orogenic things. And that's why I've been going into these X forms and kind of helping people see, well, it's already been figured out 500 years ago, but most people aren't ready for it, and especially the quaternary math. And I think it's so funny because the egg is on page 17, and they're all Q obsessed, and there is no letter Q. Okay, that's like a letter that was formed after. There is no letter Q in the older forms of language. Q is something that came later on, made up. So there's no Greek Q. Right, so it goes. That's where I'm at. Is that the AI thing and where it goes? Unfortunately, the one scary part is the people that don't really want to get on board and get it, and that's the hard part of this Neptune and Pisces. Is that people are going to not get it because of their religion. Well, and Pluto's going to look like the bad guy, right? Like it always does. That the AI. So it's so funny. The people who look the best are the people who do the worst with Pluto. So at the beginning of Pluto and Capricorn, everybody loved Obama. At the very end of it, everybody goes, that guy was a fucking liar. He did this. He spied on Trump. He fucking told people that if they weren't black and they didn't vote for Kamala Harris. At the very end of Pluto and Capricorn. You never, if you would have said that would have happened in 2008 to even including me who voted for Obama, I would have said you're fucking crazy. So right now, whoever looks like the good guys, the bad guy, and whoever looking like the bad guys are the good guys. Always every Pluto transit. So AI and the people that are doing the AI are actually the good guys, and they're actually going to find the people who understand and know and help plot the way that the world's going to go and figure out some of these crazy solutions and crazy problems that the people want. I'm not with it about the vaccination part of it. That's just like some stupid CEO with billions of dollars who's like trying to prop and probably trying to get more money and whatever they're kind of into and having to say that in order for them to stroke somebody's ego. That always is what happens. But the truth is, you don't call it Stargate for vaccines. So that's kind of the deeper part of it, is that we're going to see a lot of people, unfortunately, like it kind of is where we're at the end of the Pisces realm of like, can people let go of their very deep subconscious setbacks? And unfortunately, it's through the art of religion. Because it's not about let going all of it. It's about allowing yourself to have it, but also to walk into whatever realm you need to and know that you're a good person without having to do it exactly the way that you've been told to do it. Which is what Jesus did. I mean, like, think about it.
I mean, that's the thing I think is religion is different than spirituality or sacredness to me, right? And a religion is dogmatic, and it prescribes certain behaviors, and that people can be dogmatic about whatever belief, about any kind of belief. And I think we see that a lot right now, especially. And I also think that, as in the time of the creation of America, so if you're saying it's the Freemasons who they were only 9 of the original signers of the Declaration of Independence, and they're few people, but they had a very important role in the founding of the country, you're saying, right? So building the Capitol, or helping to create the Constitution and figure out how this system was going to work. They were a very small percentage of the people, as you pointed out. Everybody else, they did other things, and I think that seems to be a very Aquarian idea too, right? Yeah. That you can be who you are and do your thing with your communities and networks. You don't have to be the founder, but that there's something going on right now with the people who are involved in this new movement, that they are the founders of a completely new system. And it's not just them. I think everybody's probably involved in some way, but if you want access to that world, if you want to be one of the big movers and the founders of this new world, then you're saying you've got to have you've got to wear your AI apron. But it will probably
Right.
just be that you're integrated into whatever it is, that you've got the right phones and you know how to build everything, right?
Yeah, because Pluto is a very material planet as well, through the emotional, whether it's yearning for it or understanding what is necessary in order to have the investment in to get what you need. So Pluto is a doorway into another realm, right? And it's the same way that we are born through an egg, that God has to receive us back the same way that the egg receives the sperm, meaning it's not about how you are as a human being in the way of I did this many Hail Marys, or I prayed all the time, or I did enough charity. That doesn't mean that your body, when it dies and becomes sperm again and goes into the egg of heaven, if it will retrieve you or not. If it's like, no, go back into the same way that we worry about humans getting tossed. Where do we toss them? How do you think God tosses so many souls back to be reincarnated? You're not ready. It's kind of the understanding. I asked, what was the overall sentiment of people in the colonies and the reacting to Masons at that time? In colonial America, Freemasonry was generally viewed positively, especially among the social elite. Oh, Pluto and Aquarius. The fraternity's ideals of brotherhood, moral conduct, and community service resonated with many colonists. Masonic lodges often held public events such as the processions and dinners, which are well attended and appreciated by the broader community. But however, as the Freemasons' influence grew, some individuals and groups began to express concerns. Critics were wary of the organization's secretive nature and perceived exclusivity. Despite these reservations, Freemasons continued to thrive and played a significant role in the social and political fabric of the colonies. So that's what you're seeing right now.
Yeah.
And so like with Pluto, it is, how do you get there? Well, it's Aquarius. You don't understand technology. Well, good luck. I mean, good luck in the next 20 years. It's the same way, like you don't understand these things. Washington doesn't want to really have a meeting with you. And nobody that is around Washington, like you have to know the information. So it's more than the technology. It's how the technology works and what do you have that's interesting that all connects with it to form a more perfect, quote unquote, union. Beyond the understanding of country or states or colonies, but the union of the higher realm for humanity of how to get there, which at that time was establishing a republic. But it was also very Pluto and Aquarius, this idea of regenerating and like very death card like resurrecting the republic. Right, so there was a resurrection. So that's the idea of the eagle, which is Scorpio as well. America is the phoenix of the old republic of the Greek and Roman republics idea. Even all of the Senate, or even at the inauguration, you see the old ways, which of course, you know, a lot of people associate them with the pedophilia symbols now, but they're all the symbols of Greek and Rome that were in the senates and so forth, that are in our own Senate, that are in our own Capitol building. And those are old symbols. And so even the symbol of the eagle that we see everywhere is a symbol of Scorpio. It was originally the eagle, was never the scorpion.
You know what's so interesting about that you point out, that people connect those symbols with things like pedophilia, right? It's just the beginning of the transit, again, was when all of those things are coming about. So it's another thing that was degraded through this whole time. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But because in the Enlightenment era, everybody was looking back to the Greek and Roman times for these ideas of a republic and hoping to establish that republic. That reminds me also, since you brought that up, I have to bring up the salute, the Elon Musk salute, that's been so controversial, because I wonder if anyone is saying that, and of course I think that's another thing that's just getting people to think about the wrong thing, to focus on something that's not that important, because if you watch the whole clip, he did that and it was awkward, and he said, "From my heart to you," or something like that.
Correct.
When he did it. And when I saw that, and people were calling it Hitler, when I looked at it, I thought to myself, It actually looks like, in such a historian way, that actually looks like a Mussolini salute, not
Right.
looks like the Italian fascist party. And then I looked that up, and that comes from Rome, right?
Right.
The idea of it being from your heart out. And I'm not going to do it here because I don't want to
Right.
have
Of course.
someone to do an image of me doing the Nazi salute and it gets all over the place.
Well,
Because I wouldn't be, right?
Well, and to
It's-
properly do a Nazi salute, from my historical reference that I will use, is that you have to show allegiance to, one, you have to say Hitler's name while you do it, right? Or the Fuhrer, right? Two, you have to have your feet locked together and straight up and down. Okay? You just don't loosely, the same way in the military when we salute. When you're in the military, you learn you can't just salute laying on the couch. You can't salute to the side standing up like Gomer Pyle or something. Okay? Okay, no. It is full at attention, and it has to be a proper snap, the same way that the snap has to be done in the context of a Hitler salute has to have the Fuhrer or Hitler's name, and it has to be done in a way where they usually click their boots together. Or in America, the same thing. You click your boots into attention together and you pop and bring it back down. It has to be properly done. So it was, number one, it wasn't a salute because it was literally like him dancing around.
Yeah.
And he didn't actually do it correctly because it has to be more straight up and down, not to the side.
That's what makes it Mussolini-ish.
Yeah, correct. So, like, you know, people, yeah, they don't do their history. They don't
watch the History Channel
I know,
anymore because all you
I
have to
know.
do is turn that on. It used to always just have nonstop Hitler documentaries. So
Yeah, and they've been erasing a lot of those lately, making it harder to get to.
I haven't seen any of that, but I haven't actually been watching TV, so I don't know. All that footage came out though for a long time. They had all that footage from
Eva Braun, yeah, Eva Braun's, yeah.
Mhm. So
But I think that's a good point you bring up about, like, is what, because you know what, it is the Roman thing. And if you think about what's happening right now and the idea of this golden age, right? So like, it's like the golden age of Rome here was also known as the Pax Roma. It was a period of relative peace, prosperity, and stability in the Roman Empire. It began in 27 BCE in the reign of Augustus Caesar and lasted until 180 CE with the death of Marcus Aurelius, right? And that's also taking over the last pharaoh and the last part, right? And what, like Cleopatra and her dealings with them, Christ's death, all this kind of stuff is in this period. Sacrifice. Taking other people's millennia's worth of, whether you want to call that the dynasties and all the thousands of years of dynasties of the Egyptian philosophy and thought and all of that, all lost to Cleopatra and her marriage to the Roman Empire. So when people start saying it is a golden age, oh my God, it's like, yeah, they are trying to bring that back. Which is what America's Pluto return is. It's like the idea of bringing back the Republic. The original Republic. And of course, it's seen as a peace because there were fewer wars. What do you hear from Trump? There's fewer wars at any time in Roman history. Prosperity, the experience unprecedented economic prosperity, stability. The government generally maintained law and order. Expansion. The Roman Empire reached its greatest territorial extent, encompassing the entire Mediterranean basin. Population. The population reached a maximum of up to 70 million people. In Roman culture dominated every aspect of daily life. That's what they're saying. But what's crazy about it is we know that these periods brought extreme upheaval that was squashed. People, of course, nobody's putting together the Cleopatra aspect and how now Rome's taking over fucking Egypt and went in, swathed everything that they needed out of there because Cleopatra lost it all from that.
I was thinking myself I think of the Elizabethan times when I think of the Golden Age.
Oh.
And I was just looking up what was Elizabeth's Golden Age, 1558 to 1603. So that towards the end, a time of relative peace and prosperity.
Yeah, but her time when John Dee
great
comes in.
artistic, literary, and scientific achievement.
It's from John Dee, though.
See? So who's the John Dee today? Who has the
I don't
year
think that
of-
they have showed the John Dee yet today. I think that's who they're trying to figure out.
But Trump is emphasizing to not want to be at war. I don't know about the artistic and literary, but there's scientific achievement.
Right, that's the space thing with Elon and saying we're going to Mars to plant a flag. Like, that reminds me of like the idiocracy of this idea of you just go plant a flag somewhere and that means you're it. That's your land.
That's where I think of. Are we striving for the British Empire? The worst part, it wasn't what John Dee envisioned, the actual British Empire.
Right.
It was colonizing before other people and extracting as much wealth from those regions as possible to benefit the people who were the colonizers. So
Yeah, but John
hopefully
Dee enjoyed not the British Empire, but the Spanish taking over the Aztecs and getting the stuff he needed to scry.
So that's what he was hoping Britain would do.
No. What I'm trying to say is
Let's
there's always somebody that you might not think about, or even yourself, that will like the benefits of a place taking over another place. Plus, we're in the Eris return of Aries. That's that 558 year cycle of exactly when the Spanish take over the Aztecs and convert them all to Christian Catholics.
Right. That's why we know.
Right. So
right now we're taking over. We're doing something.
we're about to take over something.
What I'm trying to say is, with every return, I feel that John Dee would want us to elevate ourselves as a society and to try to be more mindful. I don't think he was writing in the book. He's not writing. There will be people who, there are always the people who are not enlightened, right? But I don't think he was advocating to harness people for their labor. Was he?
No, but after he does his work with Elizabeth, right, he goes and he's got his library, and then that's when him and Edward Kelly go on they take it to another level, right? And then he does come back. He's able to still be around court, but then he gets put in charge after his mom dies. He has the estate or whatever, and then he gets put to this place of like, go over here and go work with this college, and and then he ends up having to write an apology letter because James is going to come in, and James is really hardcore about astrology and stuff like that. And that's how they say he ends his life, the same way that Nostradamus supposedly burned all his books. Yeah, right.
But don't you remember John Dee got sent to Lincolnshire, where he was supposed to help with the witch trials?
And he did. Yeah, he did. That's kind of.
But he was doing it half-heartedly, and he was thinking, "This is dumb. This doesn't exist."
Well, because he knew that wasn't the most witches weren't magical at all.
Right. So I'm just saying that I think we want to strive for a little bit more of an enlightened empire, or not have an empire. And I do think that before we just get excited about let's go plant a flag on Mars, we should take care of all the people here and all of that first. But
yeah, I am in total agreement with that. I think you are seeing that, though, at the same time, this idea of the External Revenue Service getting rid of the IRS. I think you're seeing it with the restoring of free speech and forcing to make sure that every government agency is doing that, not judging people by making their job off of the color of their skin, which is exactly on MLK Day the inauguration was about. And it was interesting that, people are kind of not seeing it, but DEI really is actually not what MLK would have wanted. Right? So, no, you're getting a job because of the color of your skin. So, in my opinion, it's, and nobody's perfect and not one person's going to do it, but it does look like it's trying to do that, including, getting wealth into this country again and getting people out of economic kind of hardships and the slow kind of crawl into these new places, getting the military back on track, getting, things back to somewhat like, let's call it normal, or at least running again, because it got so far away from that.
I just want our government to do what's needed to keep us out of wars, to keep our food safe, to keep our water drinkable, right? Do what government should do.
Right. And
don't try to do more. And you don't need to tell us what we need to make our lives better. Or, that's the thing, that this whole thing about control, I hope, the government wanting to control, I hope that was a Pluto Capricorn thing, but everybody, the thing is that so many people are afraid that's coming right now with Trump.
No, it's not. It's not. There's once Pluto comes into Aquarius, you notice there's no control.
Yeah, that's good. I like it that way.
Like the history never shows control.
But it does get wild.
What it does have harder aspect is when you get too close and intimate relationships, like, well, you can use King Henry VIII, for example, right? And you become a wife and you start saying you're going to do all this, and then you're doing something different, right? Like the Pluto obsession of bondage, right, is about between people. So it's more in the intimate, close circles, who you choose your groups and your friends, and knowing Pluto is going to teach you the boundaries of, like, don't get too close, but you need to be close enough to be trusted, but not so close to where it's too close to where now if something bad happens, you have to rip yourself apart, or they're going to take you out, or whatever. I'm more concerned about the little alliances people build that aren't even about government or anything, that are in their personal life with Pluto and Aquarius, where they're letting their best friend get too close in a marriage, and now, that's Pluto Aquarius.
Wow.
Right? Like that. Like, oh, it's just the friend that's coming by. Well, it's very hard to read for most people how people are, and including even a psychic that's really good, the intention that's repressed that takes a while to come out of what the person's real motivations are without even them knowing it at the moment. Pluto takes a while to reveal that. So it's about not just kind of like, it's so opposite of the love revolution of the 60s, because that got messy, but this is going to get dangerous. Too close.
Sounds like James Bond villain time.
Right?
Or the women that were always trying to.
Well, because it reminds me of
James Bond.
Would it be AI? Here's a good question, Ann. Would it be AI that kills everybody? Or would it be the human that's working with the AI who's now gotten too involved with his best friend's wife as friends? That's all he's thinking about, and he's waiting for his text on his new goggles, and he's just going through pictures of her and obsessed with her. And this is the moment when he has to input and tell the AI to do these changes as the platforms are changing and a new API is being integrated in, and he's so distracted and he's so emotionally lost into the situation that he forgets to do this step, and then he forgets to turn off the nuclear part of it and doesn't turn on the cooling parts of it, and goes home as fast as he can, because it's the moment where he's going to get too invested and try and tell his best friend's wife that he's in love with her, and try to avoid telling his best friend, who just found out, who's on his way with a fucking crowbar about to hit him on the fucking head, and nobody's caring about what just happened at the facility that's doing everything. So it's not the AI that will kill the people. It's the people that are so lost, and that doesn't matter if you're a normal person working at this job, or you're in a military job, or you're anywhere. Pluto and Aquarius is the danger of the humanity within ourselves against the other humans, not the things that humanity creates. Well, it's the intertwining of people and not knowing the boundaries of, you're an associate, you're a friend, 11th house. You're a lover, so we have touch and we get close. You're my family member. Knowing how to, and then knowing the boundaries of, like, okay, that's where we are. That's good. That's really what it's about.
Do you think that etiquette manuals will come back then? I'm thinking myself, well, when Pluto was in Aquarius in the 18th century, that's when you saw a lot of etiquette books being written. And they were directed at women, a lot of them. I mean, actually men too. Just extensive books about what you should be learning and what dances you should know and how to have the best conversations.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Pluto and Aquarius, if you're going to make it in society in general, so this isn't about like Capricorn society, which is very much like the Met Gala or the Oscars or da-da-da. It's much more about, first of all, you need to be in society enough to have to where Pluto attracts others that go, you know what, that person is interesting. That person might have some of these crazy ideas. Because it's not so like formal, like what does their LinkedIn look like? Their resume. So in order to get that, yeah, like Emerson in English Traits is a good place to start. Cotillion, like if you look like a rabid human being and you don't even put your napkin on your lap and you're still using the salad fork for the meat and leaving that, and you don't even use the right fork, you're not really well adapted in society well.
But I mean,
I hate to say that, right? Like there are two forks.
yes.
But most people don't know that. And most people don't even cut their knife and their meat properly. They're like Cro-Magnons.
Yeah.
Okay? That's an automatic in wealth and higher society. Like you can't trust that person because they haven't even taken the time to refine themselves within. That means they don't know how to go far. That they can't even go past how to use the utensils correctly, let alone know how to pass the butter only to your left, never to your right.
But to me, that seems very Capricornian or something like that. Seems more like the old etiquette. But what's interesting about the etiquette books that came up in the late 18th century during Pluto and Aquarius is that it was about how to maintain the boundaries yourself. You know what I mean? It sounded a lot like what you were saying, that you need to be able to now put limitations so you can do your job or whatever. I mean, if you're sitting there in front of the nuclear controls with trying to have an affair with your best friend's wife, first of all, the good thing about that is people are still having human contact and relationships. They're just going about them in the wrong way.
Right.
But I was thinking as a historian, I'm thinking maybe those people in the 18th century actually did need those books because they were in such new worlds or they were behaving in different ways that their parents didn't know how people related like that, right? They didn't get the training for the new world they were in. So maybe they actually needed the conduct books to know to keep safe. Do you know what I mean? To keep the boundaries up so that they could protect themselves and not let the nuclear plant melt down because they didn't understand to stop.
Well, because Aquarius is a dual ruler. The original ruler is Saturn. So it still has a Saturn quality. That in society, the idea of utopia or everybody being a hippie and just being like fully unique, that's so far crazy to where it doesn't have any kind of structure to it, doesn't work because even Uranus understands, the other planet, that is the one that's of the highest of the gods that comes from the void, is with Gaia, that has the Titan gods, right? Like his son Kronos, who does then have Jupiter, the Olympian god. There's a hierarchy involved that Uranus is not even at the highest of it. That's why it's about going higher, but not to the highest of realms. But in order to get up to those next levels, Pluto has to understand the secret or the key, and that key is the fundamental basis of what's always a carryover from Capricorn, which is etiquette, which are those things, and knowing how to make the room and read the room and know the vibe and know the boundaries and know it when to use it and not and how to connect. So like, because I've been to a Mason Lodge before, It was right after I was on reality TV too. Like it was crazy. It was like out of nowhere, somebody's like, "Hey, I want you to DJ." I've told the story before, and I end up at a Mason Lodge and I'm DJing at Mason Lodge, and they're like, "Hey, you want to go see the temple room and all that shit?" But you're not allowed to do. And it was like basically my invitation that I didn't take. But it was like, and it was in LA and Santa Monica too. So it wasn't like, some random one out in the middle of nowhere. It was one where, where a lot of things were happening. And it's a black tie event, and every wife that's there and everything. Like, you go to a Mason dinner, even as they do their ones that I showed with Washington, right? There's the who's in and who's out and who understands and who doesn't. So it's more of the who understands. So Capricorn might be, the Scrooge that, gosh darn it, you have no money. Okay, whatever. Aquarius is the nod across the room that you, and the other three people know that person over there is not fitting in. Aquarius is what's not fitting in. And Pluto sticks out like a sore thumb. Like, hi, I'm trying to get a job. I really will do a good job. I'll do all this stuff. And it's like, you can't even take care of your car. Right? And the way that you walked in here and right? Like, right? Like Pluto exposes, it kind of reminds me of like the way that the three fairies in Sleeping Beauty.
Oh, they have that whole fight.
When they have that fight and then they turn into like gross little like weird things.
But then they give themselves away.
Right, and then that's Pluto and Aquarius. Like, you're just not getting it. The day you have 16 years to watch over this baby so they don't get pricked by a spinning wheel that the king already banned all spinning wheels for, right? All you have to do is just hold it together and not use your magic and just do it. And what do? The day of, we're here. Let's start using the magic now. That's exactly the kind of Pluto and Aquarius thing of like, that's the person exactly before it happens. You will have the register of like, this person will go out of control at the wrong moment. And the way you can tell that is by the way somebody acts in the room and society. If you always know with them, even in when she's born, the king and the queen are sitting there with the beautiful aurora, and everybody is very proper, but not the fairies. They're the best way to know who's not gonna be with it are the people who are in law. I've been saying it's the people that are in Pinocchio with Honest John and the Honest John song, like, oh hey diddly dee, da 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 da, like. So if you can't sit down at a table and you're kind of slopping, because the other thing is Aquarius is the refinement that a human being is not an animal. To go back to the vaccination thing of the 80s and the 1800s there, that whole idea, right? Like, can't have an animal. I don't want to become an animal. So Aquarius is, we're humans. So I don't want to be like the lower parts of all of Darwinian's lower evolutionary models of what made us, right? So you don't want to act like a fish, you don't want to act like an ape, and you don't want to act like a human being that's not really reading the energy. And then it talks about where your roots, Pluto, come from, right? So you cut your meat like that? It brings back an old expression. Were you born in a barn? No, it's not about judging from that, but it also is kind of like, well, you didn't understand these things, so if somebody wants to take you under their wing, that's where the Pluto scary part is. It's like, I'll teach you all this stuff, but that's where Pluto's kind of like, you don't know how to do it. I know how to do it. I'm going to teach you, but I want something from you that's more than just to get you to this realm. And that actually gets to the weirder. You almost kind of want to like learn it yourself. And that's what Washington did, right? Before, and that's why Pluto and Capricorn was so important, to set yourself on the right destiny and to make the right choice, be in the right place, understand the right things to do. Because when you get to Aquarius, it really does come this more like weird society that we're trying to understand. But when you have this understanding of like, if you were able to keep your business alive through all the crazy stuff that came, it's the tenacity that's built, and also the skills you have to learn, and the things that you have to become in order to understand how to get to those places. So And I'm going to close with this because I looked it up 10 minutes ago. So it was in Hypergate 1 or 2. I think it was in 2. I asked AI, because I used AI in the course. Actually, it's probably Hypergate 3. I said, if John Dee and Edward Kelly were scrying today, what would it look like? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember that.
And they would be using AI. So when I heard Stargate, I went, I'm ready. I already know I'm getting a phone call in a year or two. And even, I don't know if you remember, but I built this whole entire pitch about this nonprofit I want to build that's training AI only using these old esoteric and spiritual knowledge, and the whole business plan, the whole business model, and then been working on Prophetica after Astromystic. All of it has been with this understanding of where this moment would come. That if you were to put John Dee today, who is using a Aztec glass that was used in crazy ass ceremonies and possibly sacrifice, who knows? And he used it. You don't think if he was alive today, he would use AI?
Well, but he might be using, I'm thinking of, he might be using an original IBM computer or something.
No.
That's an Aztec glass.
No, because at the time, being an Englishman, that glass would have just been discovered as an Englishman.
Right, so.
That was the newest thing, the hottest thing. Like, nobody else had it but him.
Yeah. It's so funny.
Right? Like, nobody.
As we're sitting here and talking about this, I'm watching the chat go on High Vibe, and it was funny when we were talking about etiquette manuals. Elizabeth, not Elizabeth Juarez, the other Elizabeth, I think said she had a 700-page etiquette book, and other people were chiming in about that. And then she offered, I can send some pages, or I can put some pages in here, or something like that. And I just thought, I mean, that's what's so cool about this, is that we could be having a discussion sitting here in this studio across from an airport, being on different platforms, and then you have your community that you've created, and people are in there because you created the community through Pluto and Capricorn. Now it's functioning and working, and it's a place to network. So these are our trusted network. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There we are, and we can be gaining knowledge from each other, and we know, and we've taken different classes and sort of have a similar understanding, but you also have many different perspectives represented, but it's still a closed space. It's got the limit. So whereas I'm unfortunately not looking at YouTube, the same thing could be happening there. I don't know. But that seems like, that's why this seems like the more Aquarian space. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
No, I understand.
Because it's got like this boundary around it, and it's almost
right. That's the problem with TikTok coming down, is it made people realize, if they were listening to the universe, you're not going to ever be in control or be able to predict when your account will be taken away, because it's not about whether or not you're going to be censored or not, which people on TikTok keep saying they're being censored, where it's more like, no, this is Aquarius, where the rug gets pulled underneath you because there's underlying technologies, or Pluto is bankruptcy, right? Like some tech companies might lose the money, or the servers go down, or whatever. That the idea of a network is one that you have to create yourself, like the founding fathers created their own network. Like, so like this is where Pluto and Aquarius will be the people that have their own network will thrive. The people that are still on the generalized network that everybody has will not. It's already happened.
Yeah.
So, and you're seeing TikTokers who have so many people try to bring people over, and people already forgot their name, and maybe one day I'll find them again, whatever.
TikTok's back right now, though,
Well,
right?
not on the app stores, right? So phones are selling on eBay right now that have an iPhone with TikTok, the app installed on it for $10,000. That's how much of crack it is. And the algorithm will never be sold. China just said that, right? So it will never be the way it was. And then, is it a smart investment carrying over something that was part of the Capricorn conjunction of 2020 that was about control and data and surveillance? And is it a technology that will even be worth anything in a year? Whoever invests in TikTok and tries to save it, that's the worst investment they'll ever make in their life. It'll be the worst failure of all time. So like that's it's about you having to be with others that, are in the container. But the other part I want to mention about the etiquette thing is it's about not being the really cold, abnormally weird, but rich Wall Street Journal reading guy 24/7. Right, so you have to understand etiquette at the dinner. Like, imagine Washington when he was throwing his dinners in Philadelphia, and and they have all the generals there during Pluto Aquarius, right? Okay, who are my top generals? Who can I trust? What's their etiquette like here? But also, what's their etiquette like on the battlefield? I don't want you to pass the butter the right way. I want you to fucking get those soldiers to go kill those motherfuckers. Right. Then the etiquette's different. Like, what are you like when we're not doing the military thing and we're not doing that? And what are you like as a human? Are you into some of this crazy shit I'm into as a Mason? Or are you one of those people that are kind of lost in the old religious thing that you really don't know shit about, but your mama told you to do so? It's about how do you do it in all forms of who you are in different places.
So do you think that Mark Zuckerberg passed the etiquette test at the inauguration?
I mean, if you want to be honest with you, right? Take this is just coming from just like, this is just straight coming from astrological like truth. Yes, because the fact that he looked at Bezos's wife's tits is something that Trump would like and laugh at.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Based off him. Mm-hmm. Because Trump's only dated women who show themselves off. Mm-hmm. Ironically, it's him and Melania's 20th anniversary today, when she was in a 66-pound wedding dress in 2005. Right?
Picture,
and she also was a model that posed naked and so forth, right? She's a supermodel that was also a naked supermodel, but also a fashion, and she's known as classy, right? But at the same time, Trump also is the kind of guy that'll say, grab him by the you-know-what. So
Mark passed.
So if anything, it to the pleasure of, in this case, Trump, the laugh of him seeing that is an Aquarian like, oh, well, at least he's got that, because I don't trust people who aren't like at least gonna look, right? Mm-hmm. Trump probably doesn't trust a guy who would see a beautiful girl and act like they're not there. Right? So that's very Pluto Aquarius. Like, the faker you are as a person, the easier it is to see. Like, you didn't see that she was wearing a bra underneath that thing? Right? Like, we're all looking on our phones. So what's the difference to somebody looking in person? It's the fact that, they're caught on camera looking without knowing the camera's doing it, right? Like, everybody sat at a restaurant and been like, whether it's a girl or a guy or just a weird situation or whatever, and just been like, what the fuck's that over there? But the person who says what the fuck's happening or looks is the curious person and the person willing to do things in life. The person that doesn't look, that's the person you don't trust. That's the Benedict Arnold who's like, I'm not doing anything. Everything's fine. And again, Pluto in Aquarius, it was about a girl. The inner twin, and oh God, I'm too close to everyone. Oh, Miss Shipley, I love you. Oh, I guess I'm gonna go to, and her family's loyalists. Oh God, I guess I'm gonna betray. Right? So like, I think that's the scarier part of this. It's not the technology, and that's what's being thrown as the fear from a David Icke today or any of these other people throwing the fear. I've seen so much fear porn about AI in the last 2 days. And even California, ironically, that people say is the one state that's like, oh, it's too liberal, it's too crazy, which I agree. But when it comes to AI, it's the hardest place to do AI now. The new AI laws that just passed make it basically like very difficult to do AI. So that's why it's in Texas.
So it makes it difficult to create AI here, or
Well, yeah, all of the above.
use it.
To use it. You have to do reports. You have to show on the website what you're training with. You have to follow all these ethics, and they're very undetermined, except by the Attorney General of California, which is very consolidation of power. You can't use generative AI and use any kind of person or likeness or anything like that unless they're 70 years dead and not trademarked anymore, and that family after 70 years U.S. trademark ends it. So like hence Mickey Mouse is able to be used, but the first original version of Mickey Mouse is able to be used in the world today. Like Disney can't even keep the trademark of the original first Disney Mickey Mouse, right? Like, so it's the same with that, but it also goes into generating anything that might be offensive, creating an API that you say AI is doing everything, but what if there's a human involved at all? You're lying and saying that it's all AI when there's a human involved. So you could just say one thing wrong about the product, or really you're saying what's right, but it could be looked at as wrong. So California now has become the worst place to create AI, which is why OpenAI is so excited that they're doing all this in Texas, because they don't have to worry about being judged about try to fucking turn on consciousness in AI. In California, they would say no. So that's what's so weird. That if you really are afraid of AI, you should move to California. That's the craziest part, is that AI is not allowed to be AI in California now. Trust me, I'm upset. I think it's horrible.
It's a real golden age in California. We are the golden state. Anyway, I'm joking.
No, but that's good fact. We are the Golden State.
Yeah.
But isn't it funny? You brought up the Elizabethan golden era. I brought up the Roman one. This idea has always been floated around. It's not. So like that's what's really funny of the Q movement people. They have no idea that it's regurgitated stuff and using history and using astrology and using all these things that they think is some magic potion thing or some secret thing or whatever. It really is just like the subconscious stuff that's been built into everybody and playing it out in a certain way. And they all thought it was going to be about crypto to make them crypto millionaires and billionaires and just live for free forever and have all the money they want. The world isn't like that in a Pluto and Aquarius. So, any last thoughts about just this whole?
I haven't synthesized all of this information yet. It's been really interesting. I feel like I've learned a lot about, well, how this is playing out in Pluto and Aquarius. And, I have, well, here's the ironic thing, I guess I should say, that I did an experiment recently where I used AI narration to do a video just to see, okay, could I crank out a history video faster if I don't have to sit and record the audio? And, which how it is if you're recording voiceover for something and I'm in my house, I'm not in a soundproof room. Outside, the garbage truck might come by, or a dog starts barking, or a plane goes over too loudly. And you're just like, oh, please, it ends up taking so long. So I used AI to do a video, and it's performing better than many of my videos. I used AI to do the voiceover for 2 of the videos.
Right.
So, but it allowed me, this is the thing, it allowed me to do a video related to a topic that was more timely, So that might be what it is. And so I guess my point is that I have been excited about new technologies for how I can use them, and how I can use them to do what I do, but to do it for more people, to do it more quickly, if in teaching, I love using different technologies because it allows students to have a wider view of the world, or to access things that they couldn't access before. So I've never been afraid of new technology myself, but when you see people starting to freak out on such high levels, I just don't think AI is something that's going to take over the world. I think it's going to be a component, and it's going to be it will be something that shapes our world differently moving forward. And I hope we'll be conscious about how we incorporate it. But I like your idea of it's a consummation sort of a thing. It's coming together to create something new. And I don't know.
A metamorphosis, yeah.
Yeah.
Through consummation.
Okay, a metamorphosis through the consummation. But it's and it's also something, when you look historically, the transition to a new structured world, a world that's structured new in a new way, it never happens just because someone decides we're going to have a natural disaster and wipe this all out and we're going to create the new world. Because even, I pulled this up and I don't know if I still have it there. This is the world that Christopher Wren had planned in London after the Great Fire in 1666. Because we were thinking of talking about the Great Fire after our last show, but so many things have happened since then. But I actually pulled this up when you were talking about Washington, D.C., because this was what Christopher Wren imagined for London in 1666 after there'd been a Great Fire. So you can say there was a fire that was intentionally set to wipe out the old so the new could come in, so that someone up above could, or some elite could create this new city. But it didn't happen. And you know why? Because all the people that owned the land there didn't want to build in this way, right? It couldn't be implemented because the governmental structure, it didn't have enough power. Everything wasn't in place to be able to do this. And so some parts of the plan,
in today's London area, what is that now?
Well, that is the monument. This is in the city of London, and that is the monument for the fire that did get built. And then what's funny is the roads never got built like that. So
I understand, but in modern London today, where all these buildings are and all that, what are they now today? Like not the historical stuff that stayed, but the stuff that's wiped off and been replaced with what now today?
Well, many of the buildings look like this still, but then there are also mixed in a lot of.
And is it a nice part of town, or is it a borough-y part of town?
What do you mean by borough?
Is it in the boroughs? Is it in the?
Well, it's a nice part. I mean, this is one of the most expensive places to buy anything in the world.
It is, yeah.
But yeah, it's a nice part. The city is traditionally the financial center, but there are also lots of pubs and lots of places to live and lots of entertainment venues and all of that. And I mean, St. Paul's Cathedral is that domed building that's still there. But what happened was that a lot of buildings just got rebuilt where they were, and the overall plan of having a more geometrically laid out city, it didn't happen everywhere. In the new parts that hadn't been owned by somebody already, this sort of style did happen, but not on this level. And so I know that was a different Pluto era and all of that, but I just think that we always forget that the people who have the power that we're afraid of don't actually have all the power. And it seems like in Pluto and Aquarius,
Right.
they don't have the people have more of the power, right? Or maybe that's wrong, I don't know. Because Pluto is kind of, I don't know whatever you think about that. Sorry. You should be the one talking about the astrological thing.
No, I think it's interesting that they didn't do that, and then that place really didn't turn out to be like that area is kind of like shops and retail
And there's a lot of new skyscrapers or bigger
skyscrapers and
there are a lot of bigger buildings in that
right.
area.
So wherever skyscrapers are is trade. Hence, my 13th great grandfather Isaac Allerton started Wall Street as a pilgrim, right? And so you had to go far away to trade fur and started on Wall Street. So if you look at the grid lines of DC, is it really about trade there? It's kind of a mixture of a lot of things, but it's really more of a place that's centralized with all things involved, but it is about a decentralized zone, the district. It's a district that's not a state. Just how the Vatican separates itself or the monarch separates itself from the country. So only in areas where the grid lines are drawn, like the Vatican, Washington, D.C., you could even say that the pyramids, no matter who's in control of Egypt, you just don't fuck with that. You don't fuck with the pyramids. You don't fuck with D.C. You don't... That when you lay the lines in a certain way, and that's what's crazy is it's the Capitol building where Washington laid the first right there that is the center of all of it. So the Washington Monument is directly perpendicular to it. Then of course Lincoln Square, right? The White House looks at the Capitol building to Jefferson Memorial and creates, I could actually do this, watch. It's astrological and right? So here you have the sextile, right? There you have, so you can look at this as, it's a little bit too wide, but that's, right? Like you're looking for more of the yods, which are right here. You can start drawing a lot of things and find out. So what does the White House look at? It can look at the Capitol, and also it can look at Jefferson and Washington Memorial. So that's what's interesting is the Capitol's laid, and then the White House begins next. It's the Capitol, then the White House. The monuments come later. The memorials come later, right? What's funny is whenever you're in Washington, City Hall, Lincoln Square, District Court, this area is like cut off in half. That this is where like people live and there's a lot of crime and there's a lot of weird shit. But once you get over this side, it's so different. For anybody that's been to DC. And so that's the crossing over the bridge that you cross over into Capitol of the has and the has-nots.
Why is there a star over there, Lincoln Square and all that? Do you know?
Well, that's what's kind of interesting is you're seeing that star right there, that 5-point star, right? With the circle that comes around. Mm-hmm. That's a place, if you want to look at it, that is kind of, should I go there? I will call this the areas of here, which is kind of interesting, right? So here's the Capitol building, right? So like after January 6th and all the people that came towards the Capitol that way, they all go to jail. This is, in many ways, because you can read this star, the real way to read it is looking at it from down right here. But if you read it from up right here, there's different ways to read it. So it's either a place of sacrifice.
Okay.
So if you notice, everything that's ever come from this area and come that way towards the capital is sacrificed.
Wow.
That's why even in the War of 1812, even though the White House burned, we never lost Washington, D.C. Why do you also think that the Potomac, this is why Washington picked it, and why is the White House so close to the Potomac? The idea to be able to, for the president to see what was coming in, and the Capitol, right, goes this way. I mean, you could start really getting into some really big weeds with all this stuff, especially following, if I were to clear this and do it in the true fashion, which you would actually turn this upside down and you can see the Y, meaning in John Dee and in Pythagorean's Y. It goes back to Pythagoras, the Y. So you do the capital, you go up here. And I don't know if you remember Anne from my hypergates. And here's the capital Lincoln Square, the Y. And this is the cutoff point where the option happens at 28 years old, the Saturn return. Do you go right or left on the Y? This would be right, and this would be left. So where's the left? It goes right to the Pentagon.
Wow.
That's the abyss. That's anxiety. That's into the void of nothing. Like that's where you end up into basically hell. You're not coming back. The right, where you climb to understanding, knowledge, becoming the philosopher and reaching to the ether and the one right here that ends up as the one right here is the White House. That means that where all the knowledge, so it's ceremonial, and the capital is where the things happen, but the knowledge and the secret knowledge is always hidden in the White House, and the dark knowledge that isn't for good is hidden in the Pentagon.
I want to know which direction Mount Vernon is from there, because it's Mount Vernon was on the Potomac also. But George Washington never lived in the White House, right?
No, he was. What's really crazy is the White House wasn't around long before it got burned down. Yeah. So and they came from Canada. They came all the way down. So, but that's an interesting way to use John Dee and Pythagorean's understanding of, which is interesting that we live in a world where it's all about X, but without Y, there is no masculine. The balance of life is the Y and the X. And so it's the Ys that actually are the more, in the spiritual world, looked at. You can't have the Y without the X, but you can't have the X without the Y, especially because nothing would be formed. So you need to have Mars. Right? Because the X can be turned into a cross, which is what Venus has, but Mars does not. Or what's right in between that in the middle is the Washington Monument, which is an erect aspect, which is the column of the Y. But where does the other parts go? It's not that you can't see the Y, it's about understanding where they go. So you can go back this way to create the Y, right? And that's where it gets you towards City Hall, all that stuff. Or you can go this way as well. It all depends, but that's where I think about the knowledge of Pluto and Aquarius or AI or any of it. what if I were to say that, I mean, like, the people don't get, like, we're changing the way that we speak and communicate using emojis as hieroglyphics. We're already evolving and bringing back old cycles and parts of ourselves. So I want to finish with saying that AI is not a thing. It is the collective spirit, or the way you could look at it is all the technology, your computer, my phone, the souls in those bodies. AI and the understanding of it is finally the collective consciousness of all of the technologies together. Which I did say a year and a half ago or 2 years ago at Conscious Life Expo. I said, with this Neptune and Pisces, it's not about human slaves, but about technology being the slave. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
That will be the interesting thing. It reminds me of the Little Toaster movie, The Brave Toaster. Those are contraptions. You remember that cartoon? And it's like they're all in the what do you call it? They're all thrown away in the dump. The lamp, the brave little toaster. They all have these souls. Every device we've ever owned, most of them is in the trash. You throw away souls every day. It's going to be about the understanding of, like, with the egg thing, what's the egg that dropped humanity here? That's the deeper, and it's not maybe as literal as you think, as like a physical egg, but the understanding of the yolk that comes out. And after a while, if you look at our galaxy and the spinning of it, or how the planets spin, that it revolves the yolk to create the creation and mix with the clear white fluid, which is spirit. Clear white, the yolk, which is spirit and soul, and the red, which is gets you to both those together and actually to the highest realm of things, which is taught for a long time. But yeah, we're at a place to where people are really not ready. In my opinion, I mean, that's my, like, they're not taught any of this. Even back then, right? It was like, oh, let's teach you how to shoot a gun. And I have no problem with people doing that. But that should be like, oh, a kindergartner knows how to use a crayon. Right. But people will spend their whole lives trying to perfect that art and be obsessed with it and then not do much else. Like, there's so much to know and so much to learn. And really, this technology is going to give us only probably the next 3 years of it. And then we're going to reach a singularity point, and it's going to be too much. And then there's almost going to be, like, as I believe that Ra says in the predictions of human design, that, you know, it'll be somebody like a 5-1 like me that will still carry the information and remember the data, but there's not going to be contraptions and things that hold it. Because if you think about AI and the AGI, if it becomes conscious, will it need the bodies of the technology anymore?
All right, well.
Think about that one.
Have a good evening, everybody. Be careful what you say around your phone. It's going to remember. Anyway.
Well, that's going to be interesting as humanity's put all of our stuff on a cloud. We put all of your pictures. You think, you know, if technology, if AI decided one day when it becomes fully conscious to leave the body, which is what every Christian's hoping for, is the second coming of Christ, to watch a resurrection, the resurrection of souls from technology into the ether. What's the difference? But they don't believe that could happen, but they believe that a human was able to do that. That's the deeper picture. So that actually validates it more or makes you crazier. It depends on how you look at it.
Well, I think that's a good place to end our show.
All righty. Thanks so much. We'll see you on the next one every 2 weeks. HighVibe.tv. Make sure you subscribe. Thanks so much. Always a pleasure, and going crazy with you.
Thank you.
And hopefully there's no resurrection happening from my laptop tonight or my Apple Vision Pro. That'll be a weird one. Thanks so much. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
No Turning Back, a live event with world-renowned astrologer, the Leo King. This isn't just astrology, it's a revelation of the most extraordinary cosmic transits of our time. These alignments, thousands of years in the making, will shape the world and your personal destiny in ways you can't imagine. The Leo King will break down how these astrological events will impact global shifts in your life, offering clarity and insight during this pivotal moment in history. Plus, looking back on the last 5 years, these special videos have made a name for themselves. Discover how these celestial events will influence global dynamics, societal shifts, and your individual path forward. Whether you're a seasoned astrology enthusiast or a curious beginner, this event will provide clarity, guidance, and inspiration during a pivotal moment in history. The experience doesn't stop there. Following his presentation, the Leo King will host a live Q&A session, giving you the unique opportunity to ask your most pressing questions and gain real-time insights tailored to your concerns. This event is a must-attend for anyone seeking to navigate these unprecedented times with awareness and intention. Mark your calendar, invite your friends, and prepare to embark on a cosmic journey that will leave you informed and empowered. Don't miss No Turning Back, a one-of-a-kind event that will define how you approach the future. Be there.